I open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters. I acknowledge the traditional owners on the land we meet on today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I welcome the representatives of News and Media Research Centre, University of Canberra. Thank you for appearing today. For the benefit of Hansard, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear?
Professor Matthew O'Neill. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay. Yep, I'm the author of submission 28 to the committee.
And the capacity...
One of the authors.
And the capacity in which you appear, Mr. O'Neill? Or Professor O'Neill?
I'm not quite clear what you mean, sorry.
Is it your own personal capacity? You're not representing... Are you representing News and Media Research Centre?
Yeah, I'm representing News and Media Research Centre.
Okay, thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I ask everyone participating remotely in this meeting today to mute your microphones when you are not speaking. Would you like to make an opening statement, Professor O'Neill? Oh.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you. I'll say a few words. We're living in a time of epistemic crisis. The very notion of information is under threat. ABC Digital just published an article today called How to Spot a Fake, which I was interviewed for. Quite a few words to set the scene. Manipulated imagery has been around as long as photography. The difference today is the informational networks in which it is spread. There's a lack of gatekeeping. Traditional media has quality standards and fact-checking. There's a lack of context. There's no explicit differentiation between real and fake, between news and AI hallucination. Low-resolution imagery, which is standard on social media, makes it harder to spot signs of manipulation. And it's easier to share or repost the content than it is to verify it. The format conditions users to interact with content at a surface level. So what does all this have to do with civics education? Well, you can provide as much information about electoral systems as you want, but if there's no way for people to tell what information they encounter is true or not, then whatever correct information is being pumped out is useless because people can't tell whether a countervailing claim has more legitimacy or not. So there's a crisis of trust in traditional democratic institutions, which is emerging: news media, science, representative politics, and alternative sources of information are on the rise. Health influencers have a huge audience. Toxic masculinists are followed by countless boys and young men. Conspiracy theories can affect public health or electoral outcomes. And also hostile influence campaigns seek to worsen social divisions. So we need solutions that are practical and have wide community acceptance. To develop an effective response, democratic education systems must think outside the box. So the proposal for information literacy education that I submitted, and I can see you're looking at the poster that we're actually implementing in schools, is the subject of my submission, but there's a wider context. So I'll make two additional quick proposals to counteract toxicity and polarization. So what we're trying to do with our program is to instill information processing and curation skills. This is done as part of the ACT Education Directorate UC Affiliated Schools Research Program with Dr. Andrew Ross Foundational skills must be adapted to the information environment. They must be fast. You can't afford to waste time. They must be transparent so that trust is restored, and they must be non-partisan to have the widest possible community acceptance. And there's 4 key skills that we propose: determining what kind of information environment you are in. Based on that, deciding how you're going to read. Are you going to go deep? Or are you going to read laterally? So are you going to read vertically or laterally? Are you going to look away to the side and check the source? Know what a trusted source is, and finally, be alert to emotional manipulation. So this is currently being implemented in an ACT college by teacher librarians for 10 Year 11 classes. And that's how to process claims effectively. And we also need to help those who curate information environments on how to deal with hate speech by giving them tools to determine what the best approach is. I also want to say a few words about toxicity and polarization. I think we need to reclaim, this is going to sound a bit weird, but I think we need to reclaim masculinity. The rightful contestation of patriarchy means that Democrats have left the building. The rejection of toxic masculinity throws out the baby with the bathwater, because people like Andrew Tate, the influencer, or UFC, they have a great deal of appeal because they're fighters who prove their strength in action. Fighting is a natural human impulse, but we must not suppress it, we must channel it. So the core martial arts value is respect. And when you're training, skills and a respectful attitude are what matters. Gender is irrelevant. So I think we should incorporate martial arts training and values of respect and self-discipline into the curriculum. It's a little bit, left field, but if you want to appeal to people, you have to use what works. And finally, against polarization, we must develop collaborative values. In the attention economy, social media content is based on dominating one's adversary. Conflict sells, conflict attracts. All the energy is devoted to destroying the, quote unquote, the opposing point of view. So we should incorporate opposite values of cooperation into the curriculum. Work together for a common goal that benefits everyone. And digital commons are a prime example of this. Open source software, which is now the industry standard, it's becoming a necessity for students to learn it, to learn coding principles and values of openness and transparency. Wikipedia, the antidote to disinformation, which is auditable based on the authority of the better argument, should be taught in schools. As you know, the second innovation of our information literacy method, apart from natural reading, is that we encourage the development of Wikipedia literacy. Not saying trust Wikipedia completely, just understand when it works, when it's reliable. Wikipedia is an extraordinary resource which needs to be better valued and supported by government. Thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to clarify any of these points.
Thank you, Professor O'Neill. We'll go to questions. Mr. Chester, did you want to? You're right. I might just start. Can I ask you, you've got a number of recommendations in your submission, and could I just ask you to talk through each of those recommendations and just expand on them a little bit, and also just for the committee and Hansard, explain as to why you think that those recommendations will assist us in terms of the terms of reference that we have on this inquiry.
Okay, let me just get the right page. So there's one set of recommendations which are to do with public engagement. And the first one is based on a paper which I contributed to by the AP40 think tank, which has kind of observed the way government is dealing with the information environment. And they call for the creation of a national body for the information environment. The reason for that is that because the Australian government's response is atomised between different agencies, there's no consistency and there's no follow through. Task forces which are created tend to deal with one issue: privacy, disinformation, cybersecurity, and they don't. And there's no staying power. Perhaps members of government also see the epistemic crisis, disinformation, as a social media problem, which isn't really an existential crisis, which it is, because if you have parts of the population who believe things that aren't true or who can be misled, then there's no way that you can have a common discourse and a common identity anymore. So having one body that would coordinate, engage with civil society, engage with academia, engage with defence, etc., would be useful. The other, what I'm suggesting is that there should be a sort of common tool set that people have, and the 4 key skills that we propose could be part of that tool set, which are sort of practical, non-partisan rules about what to do to process claims. So the reason we want to be non-partisan is because when you're dealing with schools, you're dealing with a huge array of stakeholders, whether it's children, teachers, teacher librarians, parents, members of the public. You have to try and be as inclusive as possible. And I try and sort of stay away from what's known as media literacy, which is unpacking discourses in content, asking why is this image, why is this story featuring this kind of content or this kind of person, and not that, what power is at play here? That's very important, but it could be seen as partisan. It could be seen as trying to deconstruct power. I'm just saying we need to give people tools to be able to fact check effectively. And if you have tools such as CRAP, which is an acronym for is it current, is it relevant, is it authoritative, is it accurate, etc. And what is its purpose? It takes you a very long time to figure it out. It's not effective. And also, it's overwhelming, that kind of approach. So people tend to latch onto the most obvious thing. So they'll say, this website is a .com, so it must be more reliable than a .org, or look for spelling mistakes, or look for design clues. None of these things work anymore because it's very easy to fake content now. So what you need is a method that allows you to effectively check the veracity of a claim or of a source, and that's lateral reading. So you look away, don't go deep, don't go vertical, look away, do a search, find what a reliable source says, use Wikipedia as a first stop for popular topics, and then you can tell whether the claim is worth your attention. If it's not, move on. That's a very effective technique that's been pioneered in Stanford University. It's used widely in the United States and Canada, and we've been trying to, people are aware of it here, but it goes against traditional critical thinking, which is we have to find logical flaws in an argument, we have to look at, intertextuality, we have to think deeply. That's fine if you're sure about the quality of the source. But if you're not, you could be wasting your time, because disinformation seeks to manipulate you by mixing the real and the fake. It could take you hours to untangle those threads. So we also propose that there should be some public education campaigns. We say libraries could play a role in that. We say key personnel should probably be made aware of such tools. And one thing that we found doing sort of researching this area in terms of recommendations for education is that there's a great deal of disparity between the trajectories of students who arrive at the university in terms of what kind of information literacy skills they've acquired. And that's even within the ACT or, around the regional areas around Canberra. Some students have some idea of what they should be doing. Others have never even heard of it. That's because the curriculum might be determined at federal level or by CARA, but its implementation varies widely between states and territories, between schools, between private and public. So we suggested that there should be some kind of certificate which would be, consistent across all sectors of the education landscape to make sure everybody has a set of tools that is similar, that allows them to determine what is true and what is not, what is correct and what is not, what is reliable and what is not. That's a summary of what I said. The other aspect is this hate speech, counter speech, information curation. So not just processing a claim, but being in charge of an information environment, which you can think of moderators on Reddit, you can think of editors on Wikipedia. They have to moderate other people's discourse. And so they are not supported. So we said we should provide them some tools to be able to analyze, determine what kind of hate speech or offensive speech is being articulated, and based on that, how to react.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go to Mr. Chester now.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Professor. Obviously, in terms of civics education, the integrity of the electoral process is critical as well. And you mentioned in your opening comments about the threats of misinformation. Do you have confidence in the role of the AEC here in Australia? Obviously, AEC is charged with ensuring misinformation is called out and trying to deal with some of those issues on social media. From your experience, are you comfortable we're addressing that adequately, or are we being outgunned a bit in that regard?
I'm not quite clear on what everything that the AEC is doing, but they're dealing with very difficult problems, because I remember listening to an interview with the president or the director or the commissioners, I should say, of the AEC in the lead up to the voice referendum. And he was saying that staff were being challenged by people about the use of Dominion voting machines in Australia and how these were going to be manipulated. And he said, well, obviously there's no electronic voting in Australia. So these ideas are being imported, so to speak, from the US or other places, and people place a great deal of trust in them. Now, what can you do against that? You can speak out against it, and you can try and communicate about it. But if people are set in this belief system, the only way you can deprogram somebody who believes in a conspiracy like that is by gaining their trust on a personal level. So communication campaigns have limited efficacy with people who are deeply embedded in conspiracies, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have some questions online from the member for Hasluck, Tanya Lawrence. Tanya?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, lovely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm from Western Australia, but obviously this is an issue without borders, and I'm just wondering whether you're seeing some elements that are working well, like, for example, on X, there's the possibility of readers making corrections, so you can see like a little blurb pops below it that says this is not quite right, or it's maybe a shopping scam or something like that, and a little bit of that on Facebook. But the extent to which readers themselves have the opportunity to try and correct mis or disinformation versus, some of the actions governments around the world, and obviously we've just introduced some legislation to try to, work towards addressing, the extent of disinformation. Are there examples you can point to that you think are working well that can perhaps be supported further, or reforms that you've seen that are starting to get some traction?
Well, I'm afraid I can only think of a counterexample, which is that the community notes, which is the way they've trying to deal with misinformation on Twitter X since Elon Musk took over and dismantled the kind of specialized teams that were doing it. So they've introduced this crowdsourced approach. Unfortunately, this can be weaponized. So there was a case a couple of weeks ago, or a few months ago, I remember, about some anti-nuclear group that was being targeted by opponents on Twitter X that were constantly saying that they were misinforming or breaching the terms of service. And so they were being, after a certain number of complaints, they're automatically kicked off Twitter. And so they were being basically hounded out by these organised or disorganised or organised people who are using that as a way to attack their enemies. That said, I'll go back to the example of Wikipedia, which is where you do have community management of claims, and you have a set of rules, more importantly, that people have to adhere to, such as notability, reliable sources. So it's a lot more difficult to manipulate the system when you have complete transparency and auditability, because every change on Wikipedia is archived, whereas social media companies are a black box. We don't know why they take decisions, particularly when they're being automated. So I think that Twitter was doing a reasonably good job pre-Musk in terms of its teams that were moderating content. But since Musk's stated intention was to kind of open the floodgates and let everybody speak and not have any, restriction on free speech, blah, 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 that's what's happened. And there are case studies of what they call the Musk effect. That is to say, the increase of hate speech, the increase of engagement with hate speech, using metrics such as the use of certain keywords, which I won't repeat here, but there's a clear increase in all of that since Elon Musk took over.
And have you found the reforms that the EU have progressed? They're obviously a bit, further advanced than we are. Have you found whether that's had any positive effect? They've got programs from, within schools around, like you say, trying to improve the analytical skills of people utilising social media through to, I think, electoral campaigns to help people understand the information that's in front of them. Are you seeing, that the effect of their reforms, which, as I say, are relatively new as well, versus what's actually happening in practice with their elections?
I mean, that's a extremely wide-ranging question. I'm not even sure what exact reforms you're talking about. At first I thought you were talking about the Digital Services Act, which was introduced in 2023.
Yes, well, that's where I was starting, because obviously that was their, endeavour to try to work through and address some of that misinformation. So to clarify, yes. So have you had an opportunity to look at the legislative reforms they've introduced to understand, how it's being implemented in terms of, from through to schools into the community with electoral matters as well, trying to help people differentiate between information, mis and disinformation, but then expanding that to what has been the practical effect of that reform, or is it too early to say?
I think it's too early to say. It's an interesting question to see, but I'm not entirely sure how you do the trickle through from that to the schools. But in terms of the response, as you no doubt know, there's an ongoing conflict between EU and Twitter, and there's we can also look at the example of Brazil, which is even more extreme. So there does seem to be a conflictual relationship between Twitter X and certain state or international, multi-state entities. They don't seem to be making a lot of progress in terms of forcing Twitter X to adopt what they want them to adopt. But I'm afraid that, I think it's a really good question to see whether that has then filtered down into schools, but I don't think there's any data that I'm aware of that has been collected or that has been published, I should say. That they might have been collected, but I haven't seen anything published yet on that topic, sorry.
No, I imagine it is too early for evaluation because, as you say, it's just too recent. I have seen some of the programs that they are fantastic, but certainly appreciate your point that it might be too early. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tanya. Kate Cheney, you're indicating you would like to ask a question?
Thank you very much. I'd love to hear more about the civic literacy certificate idea and how that would fit in with the Australian curriculum civics and citizenship component. Would it be the culmination of that part of the curriculum, or what's the relationship there?
I kind of included we summarised our proposal at the end in the kind of table. If you look at page page 9 of our submission, figure 1, it was kind of like we could have this is just, complete pie in the sky, castles in Spain. To be totally honest with you, I'm actually from France originally. And France is the opposite of Australia in that it's incredibly centralised. There's everything trickles down from the minister downward to 4 million employees, and everybody does the same thing. So I was sort of trying to Frenchify the Australian curriculum in a way, or I'm half joking, but I do think that when it comes to this sort of thing, you need to have consistency. And so the idea was that you could have, key civic notions, and then you could have, key civic literacy tools. And everybody just would do that because it's the same for everybody. We all need to know the same information about the electoral system and about our democratic values. And we also need to be able to evaluate information correctly. So why not put them together? But I'm not an education designer. It's not really, this is just trying to help because I can see what's happening, and I've been working on this issue of disinformation for a number of years, and I believe that we've found some tools that could help. So we're just sort of suggesting, but in terms of the actual mechanics of it, I don't have the skill set because I don't know enough about how the curriculum is designed. But I would encourage the committee and the education designers to try and understand the urgency, which is that if we don't do something, we will have sectors of the population who are just lost because they've gone down rabbit holes and you can't get them back. And it's just about having a common discourse. And we can't have a common discourse.
And some sort of micro-credential that assures that, people have a common understanding of those skills.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right. That's right.
Can you give us, from your experience, some more examples of how the current competency in relation to researching and sourcing information on civics and critically analysing that information is insufficient? So what
Okay, well,
yeah, what do you say?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So we've actually started to implement. So what you had in the submission was a kind of like the intention, and now we've started to actually do it. And so what we started with was some questions to approximately 150 Year 11 school children, and we said something like, here's a post, here's a news item about Raygun, the breakdancer, and do you think it's reliable? And this was actually from msn.com, and it was just based on tweets and allegations, so it had no credibility whatsoever. 21% said yes, it's credible. Then we also had a second question, which is, here are some photos about Extinction Rebellion, and we explained what Extinction Rebellion is, they're trying to protest. And it was these two parks, photos of parks with all this rubbish strewn on it. And it was basically two tweets. And they said, look at what these Extinction Rebellion people have left behind, ha ha ha, so, blah, blah, blah. And there, 28% of the students said, yes, they've got photographic evidence, this is credible, right? So that to me is pretty striking. I mean, they had to justify their choice. So, there was lots of great comments like, yes, the tweet is just a photo, there's no evidence, it's not a journalist, it's just a random person on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. So, they had those skills, some of them. But the fact that 28% just said accepted photographic evidence as proof, a photographic image as proof without any kind of context or any kind of explanation, I found that was pretty striking. And obviously it's not a huge sample, but still it does tell you that there's a need to do something, right?
Yeah, okay, thank you. The other thing I was interested in is you mentioned, in relation to widespread distribution of tools, you mentioned public libraries. That's fantastic. Most people are not going to go to the public library and seek the tool. Have you got any recommendations about other potential distribution channels?
TikTok. It depends what population you want to rate. You want to target, right? So you've got low socioeconomic people, you've got Indigenous people, you've got old people. I mean, there's different ways you could do this. Like I know the National Film and Sound Archive, they had a program where they would go into old people's homes with, video archives of stuff that old people would find interesting to try and stimulate them cognitively, right? So you could imagine programs like that in the old people's homes. You could imagine different, it's just, it's not one size fits all. I mean, the tools are the same, but the way you reach the audience is different. I'm actually wanting to go into TikTok because I think that's where the young people are. So we're going to do a sort of competition. Once we finish the program, we're going to say, okay, can you please do some videos based on what we've done? And the best one, we'll put them up and we'll promote them. So we just want to use any means available, basically. I would love to work with, there's a couple of martial art and Muay Thai studios in Canberra that I know. I would love to work with them and say, hey, can you do some posters Muay Thai style, to reach the people there, because, or do something with you because you'd be a great spokesperson. It's just about finding the right vectors. And I agree that libraries, not everybody goes there, but, there's still a civic space. Teacher librarians are key allies in this battle because they get it. A lot of teachers don't get it. Information literacy has no real space in the curriculum. It's very hard. The curriculum is already stuffed to the gills. So teachers are struggling to fit everything in, and you want us to do something else on top of it. Whereas for teacher librarians, it's their core business, really. So they're really good allies. That said, I accept that not everybody goes to the library, but it would be a good base of operations to do other things, maybe in the community.
Okay, thanks. And just, if I may, one more, Chair, or will we run out?
No, continue.
No, that's right. Just on, so you really helpfully discussed the need for tools to support information processing, like, reacting, choosing, checking, questioning, thinking like a fact checker. I'm interested in your thoughts on the need for tools to support active information gathering or curation of sources that are reliable and independent. And how does that fit in?
Well, I mean, you can't. I mean, you sort of we can talk about what's known as query literacy. Like how do you formulate a query using search engine? There's different ways, there's Boolean search, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of trust, you can't really. I'm thinking aloud here, but I don't think you can really work it out. You just have to first tell people. The BBC has a record of transparency and evidence, and if they make a mistake, they'll correct it, right? But in terms of how people can themselves work out, they can work it out by looking at a Wikipedia article about a source, but that's about as far as I would go, because in reality, there aren't really any more universally trusted sources of information. So even a lot of people in Australia think the ABC is terribly biased one way or the other, right? So that's why I always go back to Wikipedia, because they really try to keep it neutral. For popular articles, it's reviewed thousands of times. A peer-reviewed article is reviewed by 3 people, experts certainly, but 3 people, whereas popular Wikipedia articles are reviewed by thousands of people. Scientific articles on Wikipedia are as good quality. There's been many studies that show there is medical science articles, they're as good quality as professional journals. So I do think it is a key resource in the fight against disinformation, because disinformation is simply not tolerated on it, because there's no sources. There's no reliable sources, so it's kicked out immediately. So that to me means that it's working because of the crowdsourcing, because of the rules they've created in which they apply. And unfortunately, they're being targeted and harassed, which means there's less editors, which means it's not growing as much. So that's why I think it should be supported as well.
Thank you, Chair. That's it from me.
Thank you. Professor O'Neill, have you conducted any research in where people get their news? Young people, whether they're getting it from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, newspapers?
So the News and Media Research Centre runs every year the Digital News Report, which is part of a 40-country survey, international survey about news consumption. And we are the Australian arm of that. So the 2024 report was published in June, and you can find it. I can send it to you if you like, but that gives a lot of information about news consumption. I'm not directly involved in it. I've worked on a couple of editions. I haven't worked on it for a couple of years now, but there's definitely a trend amongst young people to get information predominantly from social media, like 40. I don't want to say a figure because I'll get it wrong, but it's significantly from social media, more than traditional media.
So your organisation is looking to develop some tools where people, someone predominantly gets their information from TikTok. So you're looking to develop tools to encourage them to test the veracity of what they're seeing.
Just what you've got in front of you, the 4 key skills we want to do. We want to try and develop campaigns that people will have that content, those skills. One thing I want to stress is it's not about telling people stuff. It's not about messages. It's about giving them practical skills. So if we could, we've got pretty small budget and all that, but and I don't know that we've got that much of a reach, but we'll start the ball rolling and hopefully it'll catch on. I've got no illusions, but that's one way of doing it, is to put some content out. Hopefully content that is made by young people themselves, because they'll respond to it. And so, we'd love that to happen, and we'll try and make that happen in the next few months. Okay,
thank you. My final question is that you talk about a survey in your submission. Is that a survey that's conducted every year? How's that that survey put together?
Could you give me the reference page?
It says in your submission that a survey of 1,069 school children found that only 20% of the Australian students aged between 8 and 16 have received lessons at school in the past year to help them judge the trustworthiness.
That wasn't us. That was Tanya Notley and her team at the University of Western Sydney.
Oh, okay.
So that was that was a few years ago. That was like around 2020, I think. But we just used that reference. I mean, we just used that as an illustration of the fact that there just wasn't enough education in this space happening in Australia.
Right. So that was 2020. Do you have any updated information? No.
No.
Okay.
It's hard to do those sorts of things because you need access to lots of different schools, and it's not easy to get access to, ethics approval for so many different places. But they did a really good job doing that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your attendance today and for sharing this information with the committee. Now, you did, I think, undertake to provide the reports around where people receive their information from. If you could send that to the Secretariat by Friday, the 27th of September 2024. Again, thank you for coming along today.
I'd be happy to send it. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Bye.
Okay. If the next panel could come forward. Hi, welcome. I welcome representatives of the Parliamentary Education Office. Thank you for appearing today. For the benefit of Hansard, could you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear?
Jackie Morris, I'm the Deputy Clerk of the Department of the Senate.
I'm Anita Donaldson, the Acting Director of the Parliamentary Education Office.
Helene Halliday, Assistant Director of the Parliamentary Education Office.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make a short opening statement?
I have a very short opening statement, if that suits the committee, Chair.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Just a couple of minutes. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear and give evidence to your inquiry. It's obviously an incredibly important matter and some thorny issues that you're wrestling with. The Parliamentary Education Office aims to educate Australians about and inspire enthusiasm for our parliamentary democracy. And we do this through the delivery of targeted and engaging education programs, as well as digital content and print content. And perhaps you've all had some contact with our products. The audiences for these programs and resources are parliamentarians, teachers, students, pre-service teachers, and members of the public. And we are conscious that a lot of people do land perhaps on the PEO website rather than on the main website when they're trying to get a quick answer in perhaps simpler terms on an issue. The learning needs of these groups shape the programs and resources that the office develops and delivers both on-site, online and in classrooms around Australia. The professionalism and calibre of our staff is fundamental to successful delivery of high-quality information, resources and programs. And in this regard, there is consistently ridiculously high feedback satisfaction with the programs and resources that we provide, usually in the high 90s of saying things are very good. I'd also like to just acknowledge there were some very generous comments from the Speaker when he gave evidence to you earlier in the week. The Office regularly collaborates with colleagues in state parliaments and other national institutions with the aim of amplifying our collective impact through those relationships, and we're prepared to give you further examples of that if that's of interest and helpful to you. In 2023, and I'm talking in calendar years here, over 91,000 students participated in an education program. That's both our digital and on-site programs. And you'll be conscious, I think it came up in your earlier discussion, that that's about 2.5% of the student population. At present, the office has booking capacity to offer 100 programs per week, and that's both on-site and the video conferencing programs. These are consistently fully booked, and there's a waiting list which we're actively managing, so if we do lose a school, then we backfill that spot. The short way to say that is that there's a lot more demand than we're in a position to meet. Historically, the on-site role program was the main tool that we were using to foster a deeper knowledge and understanding of civics and citizenship. But about 7 years ago, the office sought to develop a capacity to develop digital education programs and resources in order to reach more students, and particularly in order to get to students who we suspect don't have the capacity to get to Canberra to participate in those programs. I think there were a number of people who've since moved on who played a very significant role in developing that capability. And of course that served us very well when we struck the pandemic and we were unable to deliver on-site programs at all. The office did an incredible job of pivoting towards delivering just the video programs and developing digital resources. So being unable to deliver on-site, we moved into that digital space. The last few years, in the hands of my colleagues here, have seen a really steady increase in the proportion of programs that we're delivering through that video capability. And that possibly is one silver lining of the pandemic, is getting that up and running in a significant way. Current booking trends indicate strong demand for the video programs. If that demand continues on its current trajectory, then in the absence of additional funding, we face a difficult question about the balance between on-site video and our outreach program. But I'd suggest that's probably a very good problem to have. There's an opportunity, we feel, for the office to continue to deliver on its nationwide remit through increased digital program offerings and by developing more targeted and accessible digital resources. We would argue that that needs to be supported by an expanded outreach program too. And we'll go to your questions, but I feel part of the reason for that is we want to have the balance between having real exposure from the people who are developing resources to the delivery, so that they're not doing it in isolation from the experience of delivering to diverse cohorts of students. We'd welcome your questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Ms Morris. I'll just go to Ms Stanley first.
Thank you. I've just got a couple. How do you suggest that you reach more people? And what is it just resources which is the barrier? Is it availability of teachers? Of what do you need to reach more people?
Thank you. Look, I think we had a discussion in preparation for evidence, and I said, well, if we did have more resources, could we recruit to the positions and have people who are capable of doing this work? And I got a resounding yes to that question. I think we would want to think carefully about what gives the most impact for those resources. So that's partly why we've tilted towards things like a bit more focus on teacher professional learning. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, even if you triple our staff, if we're going from 2.5% to 7.5, you're still not hitting everybody. So it's about giving teachers the confidence to deliver material. I might ask, I think there's more depth of knowledge on that front beside me. So did you want to come in?
Yeah, of course. I would agree with what Ms Norris has said in that if we had additional resourcing and we offered more program spots, there is no question that we could fill those spots. For us, we want to consider really carefully how we can increase our reach and how we can be supporting all Australians, whether they are young people within our schools or whether they are new migrants or older Australians. So I think additional resourcing is part of it, and part of that would be around focusing on the resources we can provide via our website, including videos and interactive displays and descriptions. Part of that would also allow us to strengthen our already existing relationships with other cultural institutions like the AEC, like MOAD, and like our state colleagues as well, who we already collaborate quite closely with, so that we can ensure that what we are providing is high quality, but also that we are not doubling up on the excellent resources that already exist.
Picking up on what you said about supporting new citizens who come from quite different electoral systems and English is not their first language, do you support that now, or is that something that you would like to do into the future?
We currently do support that, but as always, there's growth that could be made there. We currently offer a range of resources on our website that are in simple English, that are designed for anybody without any background or understanding about the parliamentary process in Australia to be able to access those and deepen their understanding. We also have partnerships with groups like TAFE New South Wales, where we run sessions for their adult migrant English program, which are an introduction to Parliament in Australia, and they are also provided the opportunity to ask questions and clarify things. But that is definitely an area we would like to grow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chester?
Thanks, Chair. Ms. Norris, you mentioned your online resources, and I'm looking at your digital programs, which I assume involve a presenter. Is there a presenter? So it's actual live digital programming.
Yes.
For the and Ms. Morris, you mentioned also you can't meet the demand. So if a school can't get on the interactive digital program, is it audio visual resources you can provide to them instead, or is it sort of too bad you miss out this term?
Yeah. I might go to Ms. Halliday after, because she looks predominantly after the online resources. I think there are resources that are there for teachers to use directly to support them delivering a class if they can't get one of our presenters. The other thing I might mention on the way through is that the team have started a program to capture video of members and senators so that they can incorporate that into the online program. So often you will turn up for us at an on-site program, but to have something that gives people that direct contact with their representatives. We're in furious agreement that lands with young people in a different way to the way that we can land with them. We've got some things that are available, yes, if you can't get into a program that hopefully substitute. Did you want to build on that?
Yes. So whilst we have program spots to accommodate students participating in on-site role-play programs, we do offer a range of digital programs to try and reach the students who are unable to come here on-site. We have a breadth of available booking spots at the moment, but what we are trying to do is that if a school is unable to book in with us, we try and meet them and try and see as to whether we could offer them an alternate time. But then through the promotion of our resources, both through the website but also through teacher packs that we are sending out, we're trying to meet those students by supporting the teachers so that they can deliver the curriculum in their classrooms. So through the office support of teacher, increased understanding and confidence teaching, trying to reach those students as in that capacity as well. Our outreach program is also a way in which we aim to meet students who are unable to physically come on site to participate in a role play program. Or perhaps also there are challenges as well with broadband, with internet, with accessibility, and sometimes they also do challenges to participating in digital programs also.
I think you went to Maningrida, didn't you? And some anecdotal, so perhaps not entirely reliable evidence to give you. I think there are difficulties in some regions in getting enough connectivity to run a live video program. So that perhaps has tilted us a bit to having the kinds of resources that can be downloaded that you don't need to have a streaming capability.
Ms. Morris, you mentioned you're doing some more work with members and senators, which I'd be interested to find out more about as you develop it. That obviously I can't speak for my colleagues, but we've got more than 220 members and senators, many of whom may regularly go to schools. I know I go to about 20 or 30 schools a year. Just talking about our jobs, additional resources in that regard. I'd be interested to know what you're thinking in that context.
You mean, Mr. Chester, like what sort of resources we can give to support you in that role?
Because I'd imagine the range of presentations we give might be wide and varied, so developing some level of consistency in that may be useful too in terms of civics education.
Yes. We might go to Ms Donaldson for that one.
Yeah. So the office currently has a dedicated parliamentary liaison officer who works closely with members and senators, providing them with support for engagements within the community. And as part of that, we assist in the designing of presentations or representing you type resources that can be distributed to constituents within your electorate or your area. We also closely support the Speaker's Parliament in Schools program and providing administrative assistance to that program, including supporting with the design of the presentation that is used in that program to ensure that the Speaker is able to support members in delivering those programs as well. I will just make reference to the project that we began this year around senators and members' videos. We are acutely aware that when it's a sitting week and students are on site, they often have the privilege of meeting their representatives, and that's very exciting. It's also very grounding for the students because it lets them see their representative and have a closer connection to people that they can look to within the community, and helps us to lay the foundations of active citizenship. That was missing from digital programs and digital engagement. We went out with the support of the presiding officers to all senators and all members and asked for the provision of a video, just a short 1 minute video explaining who you are, what you do, where your office is, how you support the community. And the aim is for those to be added to our digital programs from term 4 to allow the students who do connect with us in a digital capacity to still have that same connection to their elected representative. We currently have 62 submissions, and obviously we would like to grow that number of submissions from members and senators.
Fingers crossed, I think I did a video, I hope. So you're saying a lot of our colleagues haven't taken up that opportunity yet? Okay.
Thank you.
Name them.
Can I say it's probably... Sorry, Chair. I didn't realise that was the reason I did the video.
Okay.
So, like Mr Chester's, I did the video, but clearly I did not read what you sent with that clearly enough, or it wasn't spelt out, because I did not realise that was the reason for the video. I thought you were just doing sort of information for your website about members and senators rather than it being targeted towards schools specifically is all, which maybe if you sort of send it back out again with a bit different of an explanation, the rest of our colleagues might take it up. Because I'm just thinking about what I said and I'm not sure any of that is relevant to why you're using it is all. That's all.
Thank you. And I mean, we might take on board that, of course, you can do another one. We'd be delighted to receive it, but we might take that because it would shape what you would want to say, of course. And
that I'm saying that may be all my fault and I didn't read the instructions properly, but maybe that is the reason why there's less take-up, that's all.
Great.
Okay, I'm sure You'll take that on
We
board,
will,
Ms.
we will,
Morris?
Chair.
Louise Middlefrost.
Hello, thank you for coming today. So I'm from South Australia. We don't get too many schools from my state coming here, I presume because of cost. So I'm really interested in how we do that outreach to the schools where they are. So in terms of the video program uptake and the really excellent curricular resources that you provide for teachers, are you actually really pushing it out to all of the schools and particularly those in the more distant states and trying to proactively push them to uptake the good resources? Because I have to say, when I go out to schools, there is a considerable variation in the amount of information that the teachers themselves seem to know.
Shall I start and come to you? Yeah. I think that's it's a good question. I think yes is the answer, that we've got tactics to try and get things out. I think we're all very conscious of the pressures on teachers, and so things have to be made as accessible as possible, and getting the message out is an issue for us. We'll talk to the strategies we have for that, but I think, again, it's probably at the heart of the problem I was going to in the opening statement, is because that's the key to getting greater reach, obviously. But I'll let Ms Donaldson talk about how we try to reach them.
Yeah. So we have a number of methods of promoting our programs and our resources. The primary method is through email contact with schools using our vast database of school contacts, and also via social media and word of mouth. We are new to the social media platform this year, and we have seen considerable success with that by directly targeting teachers through teacher groups on social media. So not so much through our actual homepage, but through being able to make staff aware, teaching staff aware of our programs through specific teacher reference groups that are on social media. In addition, we also have a quarterly newsletter which goes out to over 6,000 educators each quarter, and we have developed really close relationships with our state counterparts, who also promote our programs within their own connections and their own newsletters as well. Yeah.
And do you have any data on the uptake of the curriculum materials?
On our website, sorry. Yeah. So on our website, I guess attendance at TPL is one method of us measuring teacher engagement, but another would be using our classroom resource data from our website. So we distribute our resources electronically via our website, but we also hard copy mail out as well for those teachers that we were talking about previously who have connection challenges. So in the 2023 calendar year, we distributed 880 physical packs, which contain resources including lesson plans, units of work, suggested strategies, tips for delivering content. And then in addition, we had 40,000 unique views to our videos on our website, which introduced new topics. And we also had, my apologies, that was 277,000 unique video views on our website, and then 40,000 unique views of our classroom resources. So that tells us that there are 40,000 people accessing our classroom resources on our website.
Okay, thank you. I did get a box of your hard copy materials, which were excellent. And I always think the hard copy ones, although they're more expensive to produce and distribute, actually work better than videos, and just emails just disappear. But thank you.
Thank you. Ms Chaney? You're ready, Kate?
Thanks. Sorry, just unmuting. So my questions were sort of in that area as well. So I was really interested, I'm just trying to get a sense of how many students in Australia would have had some contact with the PEO, experience in their time at school. The 2.5% seemed low to me, but that's that was 2.5% of all current students or all students in one particular cohort? And what would it take for that to be 80%? If you looked at the number of people students who'd come to Parliament plus had an outreach experience or had something where the teacher had used PEO materials, do you have any sense of how, what the penetration is?
Thanks, Ms Chaney. So it's 2.5% of all students, so hence it is perhaps we could give ourselves a bigger number in terms of if we went down to a year level. Your second question was about how would we get to 80%. I think the only way to get there is for teachers to be comfortable delivering the material. I don't think you would dwarf the parliamentary administration. I think if you make the Parliamentary Education Office big enough to directly deliver to 80%. So it's about that process of giving teachers the resources and the confidence they need to deliver the material directly. One question, perhaps, it's very cheeky for a witness to have a question for the committee, isn't it, Chair? But going back to the witness you were listening to earlier, this is not just an issue about young people wrestling with understanding or with the disinformation that's occurring in relation to civics. So perhaps a question in weighing up where you put scarce resources, is it getting young people the content on this area, or is it about those skills of being able to look critically at material? And if they have those critical skills, will they then, as your previous witness was saying, seek out more authoritative sources? So I think while I could come to you and say, give the PEO 10 times as much money, I don't, that's not a complete solution to the problem you're wrestling with, I think.
Sure, yeah. Another question I have is about, so we've had some other evidence, which we'll discuss later today, suggesting a need for a more active and innovative approach to citizens' engagement rather than it being more conceptual. And I'm wondering to what extent you see your role as one that focuses on encouraging active citizenship, like what young people or citizens can do to engage with Parliament or its members or the democratic process, as opposed to this is what Parliament looks like and what it does and, how things get made, how laws get made.
I might start certainly active citizenship, as I understand it, it's built into the curriculum requirements, and so yes, that is a focus of the material that we develop. I think that the experiential part of the program helps connect to that. So if you have an idea that you could be a representative, or that your representatives might be people that you can contact and have an influence on, then that's part of what those programs are seeking to get to. There's a lot of furious writing occurring from Ms Halliday, so I'll let her actually speak, and she's got some depth, obviously.
So, thank you. I support Ms Morris, the sentiment is that I think active citizenship, an opportunity for active citizenship is through increased knowledge and through the knowledge gained through the doing of our programs or participating in a program or utilising one of our resources helps to build a student knowledge and understanding about how Australia's parliamentary democracy works. And if, as an office, we continue to build, develop and deliver resources that consolidate that learning throughout the curriculum, then it would be considered a great success for our office if students are exiting the school system with a deeper understanding about how Australia's parliamentary democracy works, to then, when they're asked to actively participate, they have an understanding of what it is that they are doing and why they are doing it through their participation. So, Anita, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
And I suppose I have a youth advisory group, which is 2 year 11s from each of my schools, and certainly I think their interest is very much in how can I get involved? What can I do? What are the opportunities? So rather than them leaving and when asked to participate they can, it's more actually activating their interest in proactively participating. And it feels like that's, that framing for young people who are interested in particular issues is much more likely to pull them in and engage them than it being a sort of passive, well, if you're asked to participate in the future, hopefully you'll know what to do. Do you see that as a role of the Parliamentary Education Office to sort of spark proactive involvement in democratic systems?
I think so, Ms Chaney. I think we're, those of us who are parliamentary servants have an interest in people being willing to take on the responsibilities that all of you have taken on. And I'd sort of say that the Speaker talked about how engaged young people are, and I think that's the very good news, isn't it, that they are after a pathway. So perhaps where you're going is, well, is it part of our role to sketch out for them what are the ways to be connected to the political process and to have an influence? I think, yes, that is part of what we hope to do in our non-partisan way.
Yeah, okay, because I have community events all the time, and very few young people come to them, and they when we ask about that, it's that they don't feel that they've been invited or they've been included, and that that's on representatives to create those environments, but also I think creating that expectation through their civics education at school that democracy only works if people get involved. Is an important part of them seeing a role for themselves. So I'm really interested in that. Thank you. I think that's it from me, Chair. Much appreciated.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. You talked about you wanted to expand the outreach program.
I think in conjunction with perhaps if you...
Yeah, so I was... so do you have... and you've indicated there's quite a significant waiting list for the actual physical trip to Canberra.
That's right.
So is there a waiting list around the outreach program as well?
We probably approach outreach in a slightly different way, where we look at where we're not getting participation. So rather than responding to demand, what we're doing is thinking where are there areas that we haven't had a lot of contact from, and then looking at relative disadvantage with that. And we take that to the PEO Advisory Committee, which is led by the Deputy Speaker and Deputy President, and they help us to set a prioritised list over the years of where we will go. Yes, we would like to do more of that, but partly I think if we did, we would need more resources to do that, and if we did have those resources, I think it would be wise to not just increase outreach, but to pair it with increasing our capacity to deliver the video program as well.
So do you keep statistics, I'm sure you do, around where your outreach program's going?
Yes.
Okay, and you can provide that to the committee?
Like the last 5 years or...
yeah, that'd be good.
We can take that on notice, yes.
So do you provide your outreach program materials in other languages?
I don't think we have done that, have we?
No.
You don't?
No, we haven't done any translations.
Aboriginal languages?
No, not currently. No.
Do you provide outreach into Aboriginal remote areas or Aboriginal communities?
We have done, Chair. Perhaps not. We haven't been very remote in the Northern Territory in recent times, but our last outreach was Darwin and Alice Springs.
Right.
So yes, there will be students who perhaps are more comfortable in their First Nations language than they are in English in those programs.
Right. So there's not been a request for...
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And so do you provide any of the material that you put together or any of the resources you put together in other languages?
We haven't delivered anything out that isn't in English, no.
Right.
Yeah.
How about language? Do you use easy to understand English language for people with disabilities?
For disabilities?
Yeah.
Have we done that?
So all of our programs are adjusted and differentiated according to the audience. That's school programs and adult learning programs that we might deliver. And that's the benefit of us having a suite of educators on staff who are familiar with differentiating programs, including the content and the approaches that we use. All of our printed content is aimed at a grade 6 English level, so that it is to be accessible by the majority of the population. Yeah.
Right, okay. But not Pacific in terms of the guidelines that are put in place for delivering materials for people with
if someone had an intellectual disability. Yeah. I don't think we've cast material in easy English in that.
Right, okay. So you indicated that your feedback was pretty positive, 90%, in the 90% range?
Yeah, both from teachers and students.
Right. So was that feedback received overall in terms of both outreach and the Canberra experience?
I think so, yeah. Do you want to answer?
Colleen's best to answer.
Sure. Yeah.
So the figure, that 90% that was rated as high satisfaction, is from a captured data set from last year in 2023, when the PEO does a targeted set of feedback collection for on-site programs. Our digital programs are also asked to be evaluated by participants, and we can collect and provide that data. And also with the most current outreach that was delivered this year, we did also ask for teacher and student feedback, both to rate and measure how effectiveness of the delivery of the program, but also to try and understand what we were doing during our programs that gave students the best learning or the deepest knowledge, or what they did or saw or learned that increased their understanding. So when we are so that sort of double method of collection of feedback is to both try and rate satisfaction, but also identify areas for growth and improvement and to better what we're doing.
Thank you. So with the information that you collect, are you seeing different schools coming along, or are they always the same school that come every year? Like my son went to a primary school, and every year their grade 6s come to Canberra to go through your education program. Yeah.
We talked a bit about that again when we were preparing to come, and I think there are some practical things for schools about building things into their program which probably do feed into that there's repetition from schools. There's the first threshold problem of people knowing what's available, isn't there? And I think that is how we've tied to trying to get out to those groups we're seeing less, or regions we're seeing less engagement with. Did you want to build on that?
Yeah, of course. I think there is some consistency in the schools that we see, and I would say that part of the reason for that is because of the excursion protocols of those particular schools as well. There are some schools who have set excursion experiences, and they are calendared every year, and they don't deviate, and they don't change. There is flexibility in our program spaces to allow for new schools to come, and that is also part of our digital program. So I understand that a digital experience is not exactly the same as being in the building, but we are physically restricted by the spaces we have within the building as well. So being able to offer those digital programs allows us to meet the needs of more schools who are unable to reach us on site.
Okay. So, and the information you keep, that includes public schools, independent schools, Catholic schools?
We don't track.
You don't? What
presently.
do you track?
We track regions, but we don't. So we can give you a state breakdown, but we can't give you a breakdown by the sectors.
Oh, right, okay. So just Tasmania, South Australia, West Australia?
And electorates, apparently, we could do.
Oh, and electorates?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that'll be information that'll be interesting for the committee, I would imagine. You indicated that you do 100 schools a week?
Both on-site and video.
All right, okay. So what realistically would you be able to increase that to? And what resources would you need?
Require? That's a good question. I think we really are at capacity on site because of what Ms Donaldson was saying about having the space to deliver. So we've got 2 spaces that we use. The chances of us acquiring a third spot, I think, are fairly remote given other pressures on the building, and also just the impact of having a further flow of children coming through may not be desirable. So I think if we had additional resources, we would definitely target them to the video program and to additional outreach. I think we would think carefully about growing the office in a sustainable way that maintains the quality of the program. But I think if we had to take on 6 additional offices and we could expand with the capacity of those team members, we could do that sustainably, which I would probably need to take on notice with the finance team what that would cost for you.
Well, you can take that on notice then, thanks, Ms Morris. But so how do we change, or how do we attract those primary schools that aren't coming or have never shown an interest? What can we do?
Look, I think I was alluding to that being the question that 7 years ago when I was clerk assistant procedure was already being wrestled with by some of our team members, and their initial thought was, well, what's the main barrier? It's not being able to get to Canberra and to go to video. But I think this is a very reflective team, and perhaps teaching is a discipline that puts you into that way of approaching problems that we think about, is it engaging enough what we're doing? Is it connecting enough with young people? Certainly the programs that I went to watch when I was clerk assistant procedure have been long done with because they get stale, and we refresh things to try and get the hook in that way. I think parliamentarians can play a really important role in getting the message out. Obviously you have profile, you have connections into your communities that can be leveraged to promote what we do and encourage people to participate. So I think it's a complex problem, and I don't think it will be solved by one thing or another. Did either of you want to build there? No. Okay. Does that get to? It's probably not an entirely satisfactory answer, Chair.
I actually expected you just to give me a solution here, Ms
I'm
Morris.
sorry. I'm terribly sorry.
But yes, thank you so much.
We will try very hard.
Just one question. I have previously written to all my schools. I think probably coming out of COVID, the PEO came up with wow, look, this is us, and for us, something to send out to our schools. I don't know what the take-up was with that, because I didn't get any feedback, and probably of all of the people on this committee, I get the most schools. Myself and the member for Macarthur probably get the most schools here because it's a 2.5-hour drive. So there are schools that do it in a day, and this is part of what they do. But I just wondered, do you have people you can speak to in the departments of education, Catholic, in New South Wales we have diocese Catholic schools who provide what they teach in schools. There's an independent. Do you meet with them? Do you have any reach with them? Do you speak to the Federal Minister for Education as well about the great stuff you do?
We certainly have a reasonably close relationship with the Department of Education, and the network amongst the parliamentary education officers is very strong, and there's a really good network too between the institutions that have a related function. So you're hearing, I think, from the AEC this afternoon. Obviously, we've done work in collaboration with them, with the Museum of Australian Democracy. I think the answer is yes, we have pathways to get to them directly, but I suppose we're using your profile as a way to amplify that message. Yeah. Did you have something to add there? No, we're okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just from my experience, a lot depends on the individual teachers as well. I give examples in my lecture where for 7 years in a row I went to the same grade 6 primary school, and the year that grade 6 primary school teacher left, I haven't been back to that school. I haven't been invited back. It becomes part of what individual teachers bring into their classrooms. But I was interested in your opening remarks when you referred to amplifying the collective impact. And I think you're referring to how you could work with state parliaments as well. Do they have similar programs, or is there a way? I mean, I'm just trying to think how you can spread the message further without necessarily having to do it all yourselves.
Thanks, Mr. Chester. Yes, state parliaments do have their own education officers. They probably dream of the resourcing that we have, so they are very small teams. But I'll talk. Who would like to add to that?
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So yes, each of the state PEOs has their own outreach, their own on-site and their own digital programs. We work quite closely with them. We meet 3 times a year to roundtable challenges that we're all facing in the delivery of civics, education and information. We rely on this relationship for cross-promotion. And they do support us by promoting our products and our resources to their communities. And I think there is a very clear distinction between the types of resources and programs that we provide at a federal level and the resources that are provided at a state level. Something new for us that we are looking to explore in 2025 is a collaborative outreach option with a state parliament. We are actually engaging with the Tasmanian Parliamentary Education Office about collaborating on a joint outreach effort together. So there are a few of the things that we're trying to do, and that would be in addition to the collaborative outreach that we are already working on with the Electoral Commission and MOAD.
And excuse my ignorance, but I was wondering whether when new MPs come in after each election, there's a new MPs, what do you call it? Seminar, whatever. Yeah, so they get school, new MP school. I came in a by-election, didn't get to go to school, as you can probably tell. So I was wondering, do you get to participate in that? Do you let them know what resources are available? And the other question is around, there is quite a high turnover among MPs, senators and their staff. So I'm wondering how you ensure that people know about what you can offer.
I'll go to Ms Halliday, I think, but I do some big promotion of the Education Office when we do an induction of new senators.
Induction, that's where we're after.
Yeah. Yes, I think the press call it Senators' School, don't they? But that seems wrong to me. Certainly we let them know that there's some support there for them. Having watched a couple of programs, I realised that I was not equipped to deliver this information to 11-year-olds, and it is strange. Things that you could talk to an adult group, they need to be framed in a different way to get to kids, don't they? So, yeah. But Ms Halliday?
I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Ms Halliday.
Oh, no, thank you. So within the office, the Parliamentary Education and Liaison Officer, a key part of their role is to make contact with officers, both at the start of a new parliament, but also for new members and senators and members and their staffers. So at the beginning of this current parliament, a suite of resources was sent out to each of the officers of senators and members to promote both our resources and the support we can offer the officers through our briefings in Parliament in schools. When we are briefing the officers for the Parliament in schools process, that's another way that we try and support both the staffers and parliamentarians with our resources, to be able to be across what we can support. The PEO also has a dedicated Senator and Member support page, which aims to have both customisable resources and then support materials, including individualised state and territory guidance about some of the different parameters around engaging with schools, so things like photographic permissions or whom to contact if one wishes to visit a school. So we also try and support that way as well.
Thank you, and thank you for your attendance today and for sharing this information with the committee. I will have some questions on notice for you. So, and you have undertaken to provide some additional information. So please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday, the 27th of September 2024. Thank you. I thought these questions were quite good, so if we can just send them. I don't think any were actually answered, were they? Yes, but his we goes out. Ask them also how they feel about, do they have the capacity to do stuff in languages? Who have we got now? Why is everyone gone? Can we ask witnesses for Universities Australia to come forward, please? Oh. Have they actually read? Oh, yeah. I would have just read it out like that. That was good. Okay. I now welcome the representative of Universities Australia. Thank you for appearing today. For the benefit of Hansard, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Luke Sheehy. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Universities Australia.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise you that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I ask everyone participating remotely in this meeting today to mute your microphones when you are not speaking. Would you like to make a short statement?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. My name, as I said, is Luke Sheehy and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Universities Australia, the peak body for Australia's 39 comprehensive universities. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands we're all gathered on today and pay my respects to elders past and present. Thank you to the committee for the opportunity to be here today. And if I could be bold enough, it's nice to not to talk about international students for a moment, so to talk about civic matters, which is dear to my heart. I'm glad to be doing that today. Universities, as we all know, play a vital role in fostering civics education, engagement and participation in Australia. Universities are not just places for career learning, skills and competencies development. In fact, they play a role in contributing to the advancement of knowledge via the application of intellectual curiosity and rigour in research, education and community-focused activities. Quality education with the right policy settings is strongly correlated with individual and national well-being and prosperity through higher employment, wealth, health, well-being and engagement and participation in civic affairs. For Australia's universities, this correlation is important when responding to issues associated with democratic engagement. These settings, including ensuring Australians, and more specifically voters, have access to reliable and expert-informed information from trusted sources. They should also ensure that institutions of learning are appropriately equipped to deliver learning and teaching to students, and that research can be undertaken that has nationwide impacts on the lives of Australians. A report by the Civic University Commission published in the United Kingdom in 2019 highlighted the role of universities as institutions for civic good. It said that universities have an irreplaceable and unique role in helping communities thrive, and their own success is bound up in the success of the places they serve. In the current era, perceptions about misinformation and limited access to credible information could be hindering civic engagement. Addressing this issue is essential and requires utilising institutions that provide individuals with the necessary skills to differentiate between reliable and unreliable sources of information. This is crucial for the democratic welfare of Australia, both now and into the future. Our submission to this inquiry outlines some of the activities universities undertake to address civics education, engagement and participation in Australia. It also identifies some of the challenges to civics education in Australia and what universities are doing to help overcome these issues. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee has this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr Chester?
Thank you,
Sheehy.
Sheehy, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today. I've just got a question in relation to the training of teachers through our universities, and I'm wondering whether, from my experience in my electorate, some of the teachers don't have a great understanding of the topic themselves, and they perhaps lack a bit of confidence to even teach civics and citizenship. Is there a feeling that perhaps we could be doing more during their actual university days to give them that confidence to undertake some more civics and citizenship work in the classroom?
Look, I mean, I probably more nerdy on this issue than others, right? Having a keen interest in the political and civic processes in Australia, but nonetheless, I think high quality teacher education and encouraging the best and brightest in our country into teaching is another passion area of mine. So, I think it's fundamentally important that we have great teachers, that we prepare them for the modern classroom. And yes, of course, there should be room for civics education as part of the teacher training process, but also it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg process. And we've talked about this in different contexts as well, of thinking about how we have Asia literacy and language programs. Do we start it at the primary school and then encourage it through? So there's a pipeline impact as well. That we and certainly universities have a role, but we have a role at the end of the education trajectory, so to speak. So I think it's important that teachers have those skills, but it's a complex world for teachers. I'm from a family of teachers, and I know the pressure that they're under to play guidance roles, to ensure the welfare of students, to help students navigate a complex world. And there's a lot with national curriculum and other pressures to ensure that they're delivering all the things they need to. And so, I would hope that they've got room to learn more about civics, so they've got the confidence. I think that's an important part of what we should be doing.
I take your point. It is a very, a very crowded curriculum, and the expectation on our teachers today really is perhaps beyond their capacity. 6.5 hour day. But I'm wondering, in the actual training phase at the universities, whether we could put more structure into that. I'm not aware exactly what occurs now, so I'm wondering, is it a subject that you're aware does get a fair bit of attention at university, or is it just part of the overall curriculum for...
Is it just the Bible thing? No, look, I think there's been significant work, Mr Chester, on teacher education reform. I think started under the previous government. There was a review with Lisa Paul at the head of it. I think that previous Minister Tudge embarked upon, and then certainly the current minister had a report handed down on. As I said, it's a crowded curriculum, and what are the focuses on? You know, we often get into these debates around, you know, getting back to basics. Is civics a basic? In my view, yes, it is, along with reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I would like to see more robust. Personally, I'd like to see more robust civics education. And is there room for that in initial teacher education? Well, there ought to be, but certainly, you know, recognising how complex the modern classroom is. And the crowded curriculum in which they have to operate and deliver.
And you're not the first witness to mention misinformation and the difficulty in accessing sources of truth, I guess, for students as well. Is that, do you think, playing into the reluctance of teachers to want to have debate on contemporary issues in the classroom, or is that part of the problem, not having that source of information that can be trusted on a contemporary issue?
Look, and then look, there's a very active debate right now about young people accessing social media, and so I think we have to be very, very cognizant of the skills that we provide young people to assess what they're seeing in terms of information. We live in an information era. Information is all around us. We have devices, phones, and watches for that matter, that will give us information instantly. We have to have the skills to be able to critique that information. So universities have a role in that. And I've been talking to various committees in this parliament around the issue of social media, but certainly AI. And when we get a young person into a university, bearing in mind that nearly half of our enrolments at universities are not school leavers now, but taking younger people, before they have expertise in a particular area, they don't have the requisite skills often to critique the information they're getting if it's in a specific area. And I can't imagine what that's like for a young person before they hit university. So it's fundamentally important that people are able to critique information and make sure that it's from a trusted and reliable source. That's, I think, is going to be a very important part of what we do as a society moving forward. In terms of discussing debates, well, I think civics is really important to understand the forums in which we debate them and understanding the role of Parliament. The other day, I don't know why, but I found a report that I'd written on Joe Lyons in Year 10. Seems like a long time ago, but, you know, understanding, you know, that he was the former Premier of Tasmania and then became Prime Minister of Australia. I hope that continues in the classroom today. I'm not sure. It's a very long time since I was in Year 10, unfortunately.
Now, as a self-confessed democracy nerd, what is your sort of experience in terms of internationally? Do you think anyone's doing this better than Australia at the moment? Do you have much time to reflect on that? Are there better examples, I guess?
Look, anecdotally, I think there's always opportunities for us to learn from other jurisdictions. We often look to the Finnish education system for a variety of inspirations. Certainly there's an enormous amount of investment in dollars and time. One thing I've known about education policy and teacher training is that teachers need time out of the classroom as much as they need it in the classroom in order to get the skills and refresh and contemporise those skills. And certainly, you know, how can you teach civics in a modern environment if you don't understand the role of AI and social media and misinformation? So certainly teachers need that time and bandwidth in order to refresh their skills as well. So that certainly happens in other jurisdictions. But I think we should also be very proud of Australia's robust democracy and the fact that, you know, it's a continuing democracy, that we have compulsory voting and very high voter engagement at elections. That's a testament to the strength of Australia's democracy, and the education system should continue and must continue to play a role in that.
Thank you. I trust you're available to lead our delegation to Finland.
As long as you're funding it, Senator, that's fine. Ms. Member Frost.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Sheehy. Now, you've mentioned in your submission that there are some universities that are providing electives around civics education. Is there any feedback in terms of what type of students are enrolling in that? Like, are we preaching to the converted anyway? They're already interested, or?
That's a great question, and I think it probably speaks to where those subjects lie. And obviously, there are 39 universities that make up Universities Australia, and significant differences in approach to curriculum, right? And so it depends where those subjects actually lie. There are subjects called capstone subjects that can be taken, in my experience, or elective subjects from multiple faculties. So you could be a science student or an arts student or an engineering student taking an elective subject in civics. So it would depend on the institution. I would hope, and again, coming from a very nerdy perspective, that there is a genuine interest in this and students are taking it from a wide variety of discipline backgrounds, because that would enhance the experience. Certainly, it would often sit within government or, areas that teach government and political structures. So there'd be a propensity for students from the social sciences and humanities to take these elective subjects, but they vary across the membership. So I don't have to hand all of the various enrolment trends in that area, but certainly it's good to see the prevalence of these type of subjects across the membership.
Thank you. And you touched on this a little bit, but in terms of teaching students how to identify misinformation and disinformation, and versus a reliable source, is that something that universities are doing beyond? I did some science, and obviously you learn how to reference, etc. But I mean, is there actually? Are they actually looking at where you're getting your information from when you do your assignments and?
Look, and part of understanding how to undertake research, even from an undergraduate level, requires an understanding of where primary sources of information come from. And I've reflected on this in previous forums, but when I started university, I'm giving a history lesson of my life today, sorry to bore you all, but when I started university, we were just looking at the issue in the late 1990s, the issue of online sources and whether or not online sources were primary sources then. So the debate, obviously, in 2024 is not what we're having in 1998, but that is a fundamentally important part of the foundations of research in university curriculum, and that's contemporised in 2024, and academics that are teaching and teaching designers within putting together curriculum ensure that those foundational approaches to understanding where sources of information are and how they can be trusted. And it's a challenge, but it's certainly not something that we want students to arrive at university and having no knowledge of, really. It has to be part of a whole of education system approach. Young people are writing essays as part of their high school curriculum and assessment, and it'd be important that they understand those principles as well. So there's a role for universities and the school system to work collaboratively on these issues and how to test the robustness of online sources of information. The other thing I would say is AI and AI-generated information. And so this is something we've talked a lot about in the university sector and across the education system. If something can be generated from an AI source like ChatGPT, how does and again to my earlier point, how does a young person critique that? So they need the skills to be able to critique that information and go and source that information. All of you in this room have given speeches and fact-checked them. It's really a similar approach that young people, when they are seeing information generated or information produced, particularly in the online space, can go back and see where information has been sourced from and check that that's genuine. And that's really important, and it's a fundamental part of research. Those of you who've done, theses or postgraduate research work know that a literature review is, the fundamental founding block for undertaking those courses and those qualifications. And increasingly, it's more complex to get to test the veracity of those sources in an online context, but it's really important that they still happen. And that can then be applied to how young people and university students and the wider community look at information presented to them, particularly that on social media and particularly in the context of an election cycle where information is presented.
Yeah, look, that was actually my next question is if we teach people how to have good resources and good sources for their thesis or their study, does that generalise to their real-world experience where it's not a particular area of study? Do you think that what they're learning in terms of verifying sources will also go when they're reading the newspaper or seeing something on TV or seeing something on the internet? Does it generalise?
Well, I would hope so, because it is a fundamental and, foundational skill, and it ought to be applied across, the rest of the individual's engagement with the real world, right? And so that's why I think it's so important to have that kind of curriculum embedded into the school system. It's like many things, too late if we're having to pick it up at the university level.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Do you have any questions? I just wanted to go to your recommendation, and particularly the recommendation around university engaging with communities, particularly schools. Can you just talk me through how you would see that playing out? What sort of engagement are we talking about here?
If I can use the analogy of science and STEM subjects, which I've seen enormously successful engagement, and this is the kind of model I would like to see more of, right? Universities have incredible resources, and we are proud of the fact we share them with the school system, particularly those schools that have more need. And I've witnessed this particularly with programs with students supporting teachers as well as students in the learning of science and maths. And programs that from my home state of Victoria, like Into Science, which I think was started at La Trobe University, certainly at my time working for Swinburne University, where we saw science and maths students going into primary schools and helping not only students with the working with maths and robotics and other technology and science issues, but helping teachers as well, and giving them the opportunity to play around with devices and techniques and understand that as well. So similarly, I think that kind of engagement with civics is really important. The universities have skills and depth of knowledge, absolutely. We have researchers and students that could be deployed as excellent resources into the schooling system. We know the school system is under an enormous amount of pressure, right? There is, been interventions of governments of both sides of politics to increase investment in school education, and that's an important thing. But the university sector and the capabilities and experience and knowledge, depth of knowledge we have in this important matter can be deployed. And it should be part of our role as civic institutions and anchor institutions in society. We build social capital if we do good work without the communities we serve. The old days of us being ivory towers and locked away in a monastic style approach to university education is certainly many, many centuries ago in my view, and it's fundamentally important that we build our social capital by engaging, and this is an important thing that we can do as a university sector.
So you believe that if this was something that was recommended, that the university sector does have the capacity to do, or are you?
I won't bore you with the normal talking points around how we have constrained resources and particular issues that are exacerbating that at the moment. But what I will say is, yes, we do have resources. We've got intellectual and scholarly resources and capability. And remember, people that are focused on these issues and wanting to extend civics and other knowledge in our society. And it's an important part of what universities ought to do anyway, as part of what we call that third pillar, that social engagement, knowledge transfer and civic anchor institutions. And I think it's, good universities help communities thrive, and part of that is engaging and sharing and exchanging knowledge.
Right, okay. Could you also talk the committee through your other recommendations around policy settings? Do you have it in front of you?
Yes. Look, what I would say is universities are self-accrediting organisations, so, We decide what we put into our curriculum based on our engagement with industry needs and societal needs, and that's an important part of what universities ought to do. And then we have our own research and scholarly programs that work in the spirit of academic freedom, which is enshrined in our legislation, and that's an important part of what we do as well for a healthy democracy. And in recent years, a healthy democracy means that we have healthy protest on campus as well, as long as it remains safe, of course, and respectful. I think what we want to see over time is the ability for the whole of society to embrace civics education, but the role of universities to support the whole education system for me is a really important part of that. To your earlier question, Senator. There's always scope and opportunity for me to come into the rooms like this and ask for more money. But what I'd say is just allow and encourage systems between particularly school systems and tertiary education institutions to collaborate more on this very important issue. I think it's a fundamental part of a healthy democracy is a healthy university sector, as well as a healthy knowledge and depth of knowledge in the wider community of civics.
And that's what I'm interested in, because a lot of the conversation has been around students that are already engaged, and if you're at university, you're engaged in learning, even though there may be there's courses, information that you still require, but at least you're engaged in learning. And your first recommendation around engaging with the community, I was really interested to see how you would see that rolled out, because I'm looking at students and members of the community that are not engaged in further learning and are not engaged in learning about civics, and how do we reach those people, and in what way? What do you have any understanding of how the messages that would work?
Yeah, and that's
about. Sorry to interrupt, but and that also goes to identifying information that is disinformation, misinformation as well.
Yeah. It's a real challenge for society, not just the Australian society, for those people we characterise as NEET, not in education, employment or training, because they are somewhat isolated from civic life if you're not in a place of employment or at a place of learning, and there are way too many, in my view, each year that go into that category, and we have to do more work on ensuring that those students have the opportunity to either learn or earn, or do both at the same time. I think it's important to remember as well, though, increasingly the university students' experience is wide and varied. As I said, nearly half of university students aren't coming directly from school. They're engaging with university education throughout their working lives in order to get the skills and attributes they need to enhance their careers, or move into new and emerging industries as they come online as part of the growing economy. And I think when we think about that cohort, sometimes their engagement with education is more transactional. They're not coming on campus and joining clubs and societies and spending countless hours at the university bar and discussing philosophy. Many students are coming in and out to get the skills they need to get into the workforce and get a more secure employment. And so there's a challenge with engagement of traditional students as well as those outside of the university sector. So we want to ensure that we engage with students and develop them in their trajectory and help them with their, become active and engaged citizens. But those outside the university context, it's really difficult, and it should be a part of what universities do with our broader role in civic society, with community groups and others, to ensure that all people have a voice in a robust democracy. But it's a big challenge. I don't have all the answers for you, Senator, but I certainly acknowledge the issue and the challenge.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, thank you for coming along today. We really do appreciate it, and for you for sharing your information with us and with the committee. So I don't if you do want to provide any additional information, or you've been asked to provide any additional information, can you please forward it to the Secretariat by the Friday the 27th of September. And please, if you do have further thoughts around engagement in the communities and schools, I'd really appreciate that information coming our way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will now suspend for 15 minutes and come back at 10:45. We're going to start. Hansard's on. Good, thank you. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sarah Moulds. Thank you for appearing today. For the benefit of Hansard, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear?
Yes, my name is Sarah Moulds. I appear as an academic staff member at the University of South Australia.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise you that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make a short opening statement?
Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm an Associate Professor in Law at the University of South Australia, the Deputy Chair of the International Parliamentary Engagement Network and the Editor of the Australasian Parliamentary Review. And I'm actively researching and engaging with practitioners and community organisations on many aspects of the committee's terms of reference. In 2023, I travelled to England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales to conduct a Churchill Fellowship study into youth engagement with Parliament, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some of the findings of that research with you. I know this be aware of the critical need to reconnect young Australians with democratic institutions and processes to gain healthy civics education and trust in our modern parliamentary democracy. I know that our social, political and economic prosperity depends on us getting this right, on us doing better in this space. And the places I visited during my Churchill Fellowship also appreciated the gravity of this challenge. The headline finding from my experience was this: if we want to improve the diversity, rate and quality of engagement between young people and democratic institutions, we have to shift power towards young people themselves. It's what the Youth Affairs Council of South Australia would call addressing the broken generational bargain. We have to do this at all levels. We can do this in extending franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds, or in small ways, like trusting kids to direct the focus of their own civics education in the classroom. But if we don't shift at least some power from those with control to those whose voices are not being heard, we will not connect. And some of the places I visited had started to shift power in small, manageable, practical ways in their institutions. In Scotland, for example, the Parliament no longer waits for young people to write submissions or sign petitions, but they employ specialist engagement officers to work with disadvantaged communities to identify barriers for policy and legislative change. The Scottish actively develops relationships of trust with communities that are underrepresented and then provides other parliamentary colleagues and elected information about how to best engage with these groups. The Scottish Parliament also uses citizens' juries to help inform the work of parliamentary committees, inquiring into issues including climate change and housing. In Wales, 16 and 17-year-olds can vote and 11-year-olds can run for election to the Welsh Youth Parliament, which works directly with adult MPs to generate legislative and policy agendas, scrutinise government action and conduct inquiries. There's also a Future Generations Commissioner in Wales with a legislative mandate to require all government decision-making to factor in the impact of work on future generations. In England, I saw the UK Youth Parliament form a select committee and conduct an inquiry into the cost of living crisis and its impact on marginalised communities. This work was supported by a survey of young people called Make Your Mark that attracted over 1 million responses that has been used for a manifesto for change for lobbying local and national governments. This data collection took place at the same time as the general election in the UK, and the information can be delineated by electorate, making it data with critical political value as well as information that's useful for youth leaders and youth policy makers. In Ireland, I learned how the Speaker of Parliament responded to a series of youth-led climate protests by inviting youth activists to speak directly to parliamentarians about their demands. The Speaker literally went outside the walls of the Parliament and spoke to young people on the street and then worked with these people to design an alternative way for them to share their demands with elected members. In Manchester, I heard how local youth councils are collaborating with regional authorities to distribute micro grants directly to disadvantaged young people who are designing and implementing their own social inclusion strategies. These micro grants are no strings or low strings attached, money that can be used to address immediate needs of young people in low socioeconomic communities first, to build trust first before working alongside young people from these communities to identify engagement strategies. This approach has led to the payment of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds on boards for not-for-profit charities as council advisors, as well as contributing to community policing strategies. Health access data was identified at risk of being excluded from democratic decision-making to provide direct financial support for these young people to participate in leadership experiences. And so I was inspired by these stories of success, and I can see that we've got the ingredients to do the same kind of thing here in Australia. I've made 10 specific recommendations, but really they can be grouped around 3 pretty simple ideas. The first one is to approach civics education thinking of young people as citizens now rather than citizens of the future. So let's not just tell them stuff, let's let them use their democratic rights to actually change stuff too in their class, schools, their local communities and in parliaments. Second is, let's make Australian parliaments more accessible and places people want to connect. We can do this by taking the parliament out to the people, but we can also do this by respecting the views of everyday Australians enough to enable them to form citizens' juries, citizen scrutiny of budgets, and to participate in a more active way in committee hearings. And the third one is, let's be honest about the need to shift power if we want to address intergenerational inequality. It's time, in my view, to think seriously about lowering the voting age in Australia. And if we're not politically ready to do that, let's at least make sure the other forums involving youth voices, such as youth parliaments, youth advisory groups, and young mayor programs, involve democratic election so that our young people can learn about democratic representation, learn how to develop and prosecute democratic mandates, and are given the authority, respect and influence that only political empowerment can generate in our current system. That's all for me for opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moulds. I might just start. I'm interested in one of your recommendations around funding to support a national rollout and evaluation of a foundation for young Australian young mayor programs. Would you be able to explain what you see, how you would see that rolled out and what benefit you would see coming from a program like that?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the Young Mayors program has some of the elements that I've seen work really well in those places that I visited, because it has democratically elected young people that then have a responsibility to consult with and represent the views of young people at that council level. And the other thing that it has about it is it has a time frame that enables people to really develop skills and a policy process that enables them to do consultation and research. So it has a longer lifespan than some of the other activities. And also the Young Mayors program enables us to have relationship between democratically elected young councillors, but also ensuring that certain demographic indicators are met. So most of the programs ensure that underrepresented groups like young people with disabilities, for example, have the opportunity to have a quota there for them. Now, one of the challenges is ensuring that this type of program can happen all around Australia. And so there have been programs in Mackay. I know you've heard from the great people that have been involved in some of the programs in other places, including in Victoria. But where I'm from in South Australia, we don't have that program yet. The other reason I think that this program would be great to roll out nationally is that it could feed into has described as a process for having an elected national youth parliament in Australia. So that model that they put forward would involve these democratically elected young mayors also feeding into a national parliament, national youth parliament as well. So I think there's a need for some funding to make sure that we are capturing best practice, that we're evaluating these programs against a consistent set of criteria. And I think that if we were able to do that with some kind of consistency across the country, we could really make sure that we're creating the equal opportunity for these kind of experiences, regardless of the state that you live in.
I was also interested in your comments around the shift, what the Scottish Parliament do in terms of shifting power, but I did miss some of your what you were saying. But I was very interested in how the outreach that the Scottish Parliament do. Could you just talk me through exactly what they do?
Yeah, I'm sure. So the Scottish Parliament have a youth parliament, and that's in my submission as well. But I think what I was talking about in the opening statement was their broader approach to community engagement. And so the Scottish Parliament have really decided that it's not enough to call for submissions for an inquiry. It's not really even enough to wait for fantastically dedicated members on committees to take the initiative to go out to a regional area. That in fact, what you have to do is have relationships of trust with marginalised groups first. Otherwise, they're just not going to engage. They're not going to be able to see the
Dr. Miles?
lives, and they might also. Oh, sorry, have you lost me?
Yeah, we just lost you for a few seconds there.
Sorry, I apologise for that. I'm not sure if it's a challenge at my end with the internet. I'm here on campus, so usually it's pretty good.
It's probably from our end. Don't worry about it.
Please stop me again if you miss anything. So I think what I was describing is how they realise ad hoc approach where excellent committees do wonderful things was not enough to ensure that marginalised groups were finding these processes accessible. So what they did was they started to build some relationships of trust with different groups. An example they told me about was the Travellers community in Scotland, and they spent time talking to community leaders from that group, going to different events where parts of that community would be represented, going to the service providers that supported those people and asking them what are the major issues for this group in advance, so that then when a select committee or a standing committee had an inquiry into kind of land use or environmental issues that those communities were interested in, that they were able to pick up the phone and say, did you know we've got this inquiry? How can we make sure your community has a seat at the table? And the other thing that they did was use citizens' juries. They've used citizens' juries in a number of inquiries, not to take the place of what the committee does, but to sit alongside the committee and to generate a report of its own. And they do this on one weekend. So they select the citizens' jury, they invite them for one weekend into the Parliament. They work through the issues and present a report that then goes to the committee to consider. But the citizens' jury has a demographically representative cohort. So they've started to do that, and they didn't have a load of extra resources. What they started to do at the beginning of this process was shift some of their research, their Great Library research people, into this kind of role, because they recognised that research about different groups in the community was just as important as other kind of data that the research team were putting together for parliamentarians. And now they've got a whole of parliament strategy like this, so they have engagement specialists embedded in each of their committees.
I just wonder also, Dr. Moles, whether there was any criticism of that process around whether the officers were, bipartisan. Hello?
Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Had to clear my throat. I think there was some initial sensitivities from the Parliament around the idea of wanting to make sure that the chairs of the committee and the elected members in the committee had full responsibility to determine how they were going to conduct their inquiries, and that the parliamentary staff, excuse me, were not going to be transgressing that important professional line into a political role. But I guess what they saw was that in order to be able to get the best information before the committee, they needed to be able to at least find out practical barriers for engagement from different communities. So thinking about things like internet access for different groups, was that difficult? And therefore, were they going to find out about the inquiry through online media? They also talked about the idea of, some people's experience of giving evidence in a forum like this might not be the best way for them to collect and reflect on issues. So they talked about how to hold different kind of hearings in place. And I know this Parliament has done this a lot of different times as well. So they started to take their lead from the committees that were already doing this well, and just tried to do it, I guess, in an efficiency way. So an example from the Australian Parliament that I can see is that the wonderful learnings of engagement that was done so sensitively on the disappearance of Aboriginal women could have a lot of learnings for all other committees about how you might engage sensitively on those issues. And just like this committee right now is learning how to engage really well with youth organisations, is that they got to the point where they were like, why aren't we capturing that information? Why aren't we having a place where we can, go to the database of community groups that we've already got rapport with, and actually make sure that we're sharing that information out across the other aspects of the Parliament. And when they started to do this, they saw that there was efficiency gains in things like petitions, in things like their education and outreach programs, as well as things like estimates hearings, because they were able to collate those skill sets that those people had brought to the committee work.
And I'm assuming the parliamentary staff would have had to provide some more in-depth resourcing, particularly for communities that were not used to writing submissions or putting together petitions.
Yeah, that's right. So experimenting with different forms of submissions was one of the things that they started to do. But also the citizens' jury process really showed them many different techniques of taking evidence. So the idea of sitting as a group of representatives and listening first, and then developing a short 2-page report that the people that participated in that discussion endorsed, is an example of the type of thing that they were able to do. But with some of their most marginalised communities, what they did first was go and listen to those communities. So they adopted that listening mode as parliamentary staff, where they sat and listened at their annual general meeting or at one of their events, and listened to the type of issues that were important, developed that relationship of trust with leaders, and then said, did you know we've got this committee inquiry coming up? Or they took enough information from that experience to say, these people actually have something to say on budget, they have something to say on education as well as housing or as well as environment. So next time we've got an inquiry like that, we'll support our committees to give them a menu of options on how to engage. And they've now, they did this in stages with endorsement from the elected members because they presented reports on this strategy. So they had the endorsement from elected members at all of the different stages of this. But I think the mindset around what counts as good evidence really did shift.
Thank you. We have some questions from Ms. Cheney.
Thank you very much. Just further to that, I'm really interested in, because you talk about increased investment in parliamentary staff with those specific skills in community education. Do you, or based on the examples that you've seen, is that actually supporting elected representatives to do community engagement differently, or is it, or would those people operate independently of representatives? Because, you know, I mean, in my team, I have a community engagement person and we run workshops and things like that. That's very much within my discretion of which people I put on my team. Do you see this as sitting alongside that or being more upskilling people on, say, my team?
Yeah, I think hopefully ends up becoming an iterative process. But what I saw, say, in the UK is that they've got like a core group that do education and outreach and engagement. But they're trying to now embrace a devolved model of Skillshare that would support elected members, staff, as well as parliamentary committee staff, all throughout the institution. And an interesting example of this is the way they do UK Parliament Week. So UK Parliament Week has a package of education materials aimed at children, aimed at teachers, and a whole lot of other experiences you can have in the Parliament. But they develop for each elected member. They collect all the data and the engagement data that has occurred in the Parliament over the last year and say, look, here are the people in your electorate that are engaging. Here are the ones who aren't engaging. Here's some resources that we've developed, you know, with researchers, with people with expertise in engaging these disadvantaged groups. And here's a pack for you if you want to use it to think about how you're going to improve engagement if you want to. And in that 1 week of UK Parliament Week, they really track that. They track and reward members, profile members who have been able to reach those different demographics. But the team that does that absolutely understands their role in the same way that the brilliant parliamentary staff understand their role in Australia Parliament, as separate from a campaign or elected members team. But I do think that having a strategy across the Parliament that actually sets targets and measures targets and rewards performance for the Parliament as an institution is really, really important. Because otherwise what will happen is that the political engagement tools will take over. And that's wonderful when you've got MPs who are skilled and prioritise that. But it's very difficult for community members who might not have that experience. And what the research says is that people want to go on an engagement journey with the Parliament that might last many decades of their life, and they want those experiences to have a consistency about them. Otherwise, they're going to exit the experience. And so I think that that's what I've seen work well in these parliaments. Of course, they're not perfect, and Australia has many fantastic examples of best practice that I was able to share with counterparts overseas. So one of the things they kept saying to me is they make very, very impressed at the on-the-ground accessibility of Australian MPs to their communities. And that was something that they were really interested in learning about. So, yeah.
Thank you. And I do want to go back to that measurement more broadly, but specifically in that UK example, you said they developed, for each elected member, they were able to provide engagement data on who from the electorate was engaging. Was that over the course of the year or the people who'd engaged in that week? And what different types of engagement were they capturing and how? I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, and I'd probably have to follow up on all the details. But the way that they described it to me is that, you know, they've had a couple of big milestone moments in the Parliament. They're doing one right now, actually, where they do this kind of, I forgot what they call it, but they do a committee inquiry into what needs to change in the internal workings of the Parliament. And they had one of those, you know, approximately every 5 years. And one of these inquiries really prompted the idea of collecting information about engagement. So they would include things like people who access education materials, people who access materials online, people who sign petitions, people who participate in committee inquiries. So the institution-facing resources, they're collecting a lot of information about. But they've also got sophisticated software to help them look at social media engagement, and they also do a lot of social media engagement at a committee level that's institution-led. So they have a data source that might have a little bit more reach than what I've seen in Australian parliaments, and it would be through that interface that they collect the engagement to electorates. They started the UK Parliament Week with saying, everyone come to Westminster, right? But they realised that that was just reaching the usual suspects. So then they started to do this package, this package for MPs to use. And also it's created an environment where local communities can request the parliamentary engagement team to have an experience with an MP as well. So it's got a community level. So an example of that is the UK Parliament has put effort into doing specific engagement strategies, like public education strategies with new migrants. And if those new migrant groups say they want to be part of UK Parliament, then there's the opportunity to match them with their MP. So, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. On that, and it probably you've started to talk about it a bit, but really interested in your ideas about how to measure that sort of systemic shift in civics engagement. So when you talked about having a broad strategy, I'm wondering whose job you think it is to develop that strategy. Is it parliamentary committee or is it a public service thing? And how would you in practice measure systematically approaches to civics engagement or education?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this as well. I think having, as I said, a parliament level strategy is really important, and you probably are going to have to use quantitative data a lot to support that measurement. But really, I think when it comes to young people particularly, they're going to have a richness at the local level with their local experiences. And I think it's there where we really can benefit from kind of, you know, the creative federalism and the 3 tiers of government that we've got here in Australia. So I guess to me, I would really like to see each local government area have a strategy with targets around youth engagement and have opportunities for democratic participation from young people that are democratically elected. And I think that would enable us to have a localised approach to civics education as well. But I think having a parliament level strategy would be really important. And I've got a couple of tables where I've tried to put some of the preconditions for that. I mean, one of the things that I think we really need is better data at the moment about who is participating and where are the gaps, and then set some targets to address the groups that are missing out. But also, I think we've got to be careful that we're not trying to say that it's a once-off fail or success experience, because...
Sorry, are you still there?
No.
Yeah, internet has...
Oh, yes, you're back.
I can hear you, but my picture has frozen on the screen.
Yeah, don't worry.
If I turn off my video?
I might just
Just keep speaking. It doesn't matter about your picture.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. Should maybe, if I can slip one more question in, Chair, before we move on, unless there was another thought there that you were finishing, Dr. Moulds, no? You've got, on page 16 of your submission, you've got a really interesting group of policy ideas there. Which would you prioritise if you had to identify the top three or so? Because there are lots in there. And I guess, how do they relate to those key practical measures you outlined at the start of your submission?
Yeah, so these are the measures, these are the recommendations. Is that the ones that you're talking about?
Yeah, on page 16, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be great to get some early wins on the board, and I think that I would love to see a democratically elected youth parliament, and it would possibly be something that could take the model of the Run For It suggestion of having the young mayors experience, and then the young mayors are represented at the national level. But that might take a little bit of time to set up. So I just think we've already got a fantastic effort at the government level, at the federal level, to establish youth advisory groups, but it would be wonderful if they were democratically elected so that people are practising that experience of representation. So I think the first thing I'd say is let's look at the groups we're already investing in for youth parliaments at the state level and young mayors at the local level and advisory groups at the federal level, and see if we can get some democratic representation in there. And then the other thing I think is that can we make sure that when we're doing our committee work and our petition work, that we're starting people on a journey where they feel like there's going to be some democratic listening involved. And that means closing the feedback loop. So that's another small thing that I think we could do. And that's something that's in the table at the end as well. So when people put a petition in or a periodic committee inquiry, including the great young people that have appeared at this inquiry, what are we telling them after? What are we telling them about what happened and what they could do next if they want to do more? I think that's really important. We've got people putting petitions to Parliament and then they don't really see what happens at the end. But my big picture reform is to extend electoral franchise for 16 and 17-year-olds. I think it's absolutely time to do this. I know this committee looked into this in 2018 and I agreed with the majority report in that inquiry that compulsory voting is really important in Australia and compulsory voting should be part of an extension of franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. But I think we're facing a situation where, the students I teach law to are viscerally impacted by this broken intergenerational bargain in almost every aspect of their life, even if they're very privileged. And they need some political empowerment if they're going to be able to feel like the democratic institutions that we want to safeguard are delivering for them. And so, I think that's really important. The other thing I'd just say is I think sometimes we have a tendency with civics to kind of do this dress up and pretend experience. And I'd really like to be able to move away from that, where instead of pretending that we're making a democratic decision, could we actually make a decision with young people? And I appreciate that we can't say, all right, let's change the taxation laws in a youth parliament. But those young people could change aspects of their school, of the curriculum that they're dealing with in civics, for example. And so when they have those positive experiences of actually being able to use democratic values to solve a problem and prosecute an idea, then they are ready to do the next stage of the civics. And I've been thrilled to see those elements across the submissions that have been made in this inquiry. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Chair. And is it still morning? Oh, yes. Good morning, Dr. Moulds. I wanted to come back to a couple of the points you've raised and have a look at what you see some of the root causes of this disempowerment or perceived disempowerment of younger Australians, because they actually have a great deal of power. They just don't seem to understand it and find it difficult to find their voice. You know, something that I hear quite often is when you get a group of really impressive young people together, they say, you know, I ask them, well, what do you want? Well, we want to be heard, is, you know, a refrain I hear a lot. And, well, you know, I'm here, I'm listening, what do you want to tell me? Well, we just want to be heard. And then trying to pull out and get an articulation of what are the issues they want to be heard on, and then also for them to be able to articulate not just a problem, but where some of the solutions might lie, and start to be, you know, having a more cogent and thought-through message, which ultimately those who do find their voice on an issue and can articulate it, but also understand the process of getting things done, you know, can be, as individuals or as groups, probably the most effective. So how do you see this disempowerment? And it's not that young people, I don't think, are any less passionate about issues, but they don't seem to understand their role in a democracy, the voices that they have, and how to generate that. So I'm just wondering, you might not agree with what I've just said, but I'd just like your thoughts on that issue of empowerment or disempowerment.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I think it's a great question. In my Churchill Fellowship report, I started to think about catalysts for change, like why is it that in some of these places these techniques are kind of taking off, and how did that happen? And I think it is a combination of external catalysts for change and institution-led kind of development, whether that's at the school level or the parliament or the local council. But the external catalysts for change are very real. And so in Scotland and Wales, for example, that process of devolution created a where everyone looking at what they wanted to see in the country, the big picture.
Dr. Miles, we've just lost you.
Dr. Miles, Dr. Miles, are you still there? Dr. Miles?
Oh dear.
Can you hear me? Hello? We've had a good run. Oh, here she is.
Oh, she's back.
Dr. Miles?
I'm so sorry. Should I call the number that was on the...
No, we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. So I'll try and be really quick. I think you have to have an opportunity for people to be elected and develop a solution, as Senator Reynolds was saying. So in Scotland, what they had was they had data collection. At the time of the Scottish elections, they asked young people of questions. They got that data back. They used that in the youth parliament to work out what they were going to focus on. Always top of the list was things like cost of living, mental, and then climate change, exactly the same issues that come up in Australia. And then what they did was put together some proposals for that. They spent 2 years with the youth parliament working on it, and then they went back at the next election and put those issues back to the young people again to get more data and get more engagement from young people, and then they were able to unpack that electorate by electorate. So I think that did create a sense of, you know, here are some opportunities to work with government on how to address this feeling that, you know, the economy wasn't working for young people, or there wasn't enough emphasis on mental health supports in the community. They could then, in that parliamentary setting, interrogate government information and workshop proposals and have those experiences. I think it's just that if there's no democratic election and no responsibility and no political recognition of their leadership role, what happens is that young people kind of, I think, become only able to really do the type of solution-finding work that you described if they're privileged enough to be able to focus on that as opposed to other things in their life. And I think what's really missing are the people that, you know, don't have those opportunities through their family or their school. And I think the data is the first important thing, so that we can go and say, look, when we ask young people in this electorate what they care about, they say this. So how are we going to address that together? That's what they have been able to do in Scotland and Wales. But as I said, they had that external catalyst for change with the devolution process. But yeah, I mean, I think that some of the comments that have come through in the evidence given to you by other young groups, including the government's youth advisory groups, about what made a difference for them. There's, you know, an MP coming to talk in the classroom about what they did to resolve a difficult issue, and then relate that back to what's happening at the school, gives people a taste of that idea of using representation and democratic decision-making to solve real-life problems. So I think we have to have it at those different stages. But I feel like we haven't asked enough questions about what young people care about yet in a way that gives it some political power, rather than a self-select kind of approach to youth leadership.
Okay. Last question, Senator Reynolds.
Look, thank you for that response. My last question, it sort of goes back to, I think, a step back from that. And, you know, as this committee's heard, and from the Speaker, that there is a very low understanding or appreciation of democracy as a system of government, and, you know, the rights and also very low understanding or appreciation of the rights and responsibilities that go with that. Now, in the studies that you did as part of the fellowship across the UK, did you come to any conclusions about why that might be? Because when you have a look around the world in you know, unstable or countries that are not democratic or are very unstable democracies, you have young people who fight and, you know, and die for, you know, the democratic rights that we sort of have here and in the UK and elsewhere. Did you come to sort of any conclusion about how we've got to that circumstance?
I think that probably not really come to a clear conclusion, but I did see the difference when the civics aligned with experiences that people could have in the community that reflected democracy. And that's why I say in Wales, they've got this youth parliament for 11-year-olds. When they're doing, you know, civics in year 7, would be here in South Australia, similar age, if they know that they don't have to do a hypothetical pretend thing, but they could actually elect someone at their school who's going to go off then and have this experience and report back, that gave it some tangible quality for them in their life. And so I think, you know, then they're able to practice filling out the form and filling out the voting ballot and seeing the materials that come from the people that are running for office and trying to evaluate the merits of different people's positions. Those experiences, when they're real, have a different impact on people. But look, I think all the places I visited were suffering from the same kind of challenge that Australia's facing that you described. So I'm not saying this is a silver bullet. I think we need to have civics education integrated across the different attainment levels, as others have said. We need to have teachers with a skill set to be able to bring this into meaning for young people. And also we have to make sure that kind of model that process of democratic decision making as well, so that we broaden what counts as, you know, democracy and politics talk, so that we're not kind of in a binary mindset that this is all about a fight between, you know, particular people at question time, but actually what we're talking about is a democratic process that people do every day at the sports club, in the classroom, even in the family. And I think, you know, that's probably what we have to do. The way that people get information is, you know, really different for younger generations. In New Zealand, their method of tackling this at their parliament was to develop an advisory group of young people who are going to help the parliament with their engagement strategy for young people. And those young New Zealanders were saying about how, you know, almost everyone they know gets all their news from social media. All their information about politics and democratic decision making in the broader world comes from social media. And so that has big implications. What we're kind of asking our young people to see when they're trying to identify what democracy looks like and then develop their own, how they can participate in it. So I think they're up against it. We need, if we can show them how to do democratic decision making in a real way in school, that makes a difference. And the lowering of the voting age really did make a difference in those jurisdictions. But I know that, you know, that's different there because they don't have compulsory voting. But being able to teach in year 11 and 12 about your right to vote and having a right to vote had a really significant lifelong impact on those participants.
Thank you, Dr. Moles. We'll have to finish there. We did have some issues with the audio, so Hansard will be out in about a week if you want to have a look at your evidence. And is there and from that, if there are additional information you need to send to the committee, we would be very happy to receive that. So thank you for your attendance today and for sharing your information with the committee. And if you do need to provide any additional information, please send it to the Secretariat by Friday, the 27th of September 2024.
Thank you, and I really apologise if the problem was my end.
Thank you. Bye. We now welcome representatives of the Australian Electoral Commission. Thank you for appearing today. For the benefit of Hansard, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear?
Tom Rogers, Australian Electoral Commissioner.
And Jeff Pope, the Deputy Electoral Commissioner.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise that this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as proceedings of the respected houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make a short opening statement?
Chair, I would, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Thanks for the invitation to appear today. We have a unique and important role in engaging communities, delivering electoral education services and being the subject matter expert on federal electoral events. Quite rightly, Australians look to us for help in understanding the process and how to fulfil their legal right and obligation to enrol and to vote. Our education and engagement programs are admired by other international electorate management bodies, and we make an important contribution to global best practice. I'd like to take the opportunity to update you on a few of our education and engagement activities since we last appeared in May. The National Electoral Education Centre remains our flagship school education program at Old Parliament House. We're on track to host around 90,000 visitors in 24-25. We are running at near full capacity with about 18 sessions held most days. In July, we commenced a trial of digital education through the Democracy for Schools program, which enables schools that are unable to travel to Canberra an immersive 3D electoral education video game. The game will be released for use by all Australian schools, primarily aimed at primary school aged children in 2025. This is a significant step in increasing electoral education to more school students. and we would welcome the opportunity to provide members of this committee a demonstration of the program at a point in time. Our Get Voting program provides schools with free resources and equipment to educate students on elections and the preferential voting system. We provide resources such as ballot boxes, ballot box seals, election posters and polling official badges. And over the last 5 years, nearly 1,900 kits have been sent to schools, facilitating classroom elections for over 222,000 students. And we recently wrote to every primary school in Australia just reminding them of the existence of this resource. On social media, we remain one of the most active and engaged agencies across the public service, with over 12 million online impressions of our messages during the referendum writ period. We use initiatives like AEC TV to communicate complex electoral information and to help us address emerging questions in an easily digestible format. Each electoral event, we run information campaigns to explain why to vote, where to vote, and how to correctly complete a ballot paper, as well as our Stop and Consider campaign to help combat misinformation. Prioritising equitable inclusion and accessibility for voters is always a key focus for the AEC, regardless of location or personal circumstance, and our current programs target communities and people who may experience barriers to electoral participation. This includes Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and people with disabilities. We have our long-standing Indigenous electoral participation program, which works with many Indigenous partners and directly engages with communities around Australia to encourage participation and education in ways that are culturally suitable. Our partnerships assist the AEC in understanding challenges to enrolment and assist in the co-design of initiatives. As part of that program, we also employ community electoral participation officers. To conduct electoral engagement and education activities, they're casually employed Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff who are locally engaged to work in and around their community in language. For the referendum, 82 of these staff were engaged, 42 of which bilingual, covering 16 languages. To support the participation of multicultural communities, we continue to consult to understand barriers to voting, information needs and engagement preferences. And for the 2024-25 election, multicultural community electoral participation officers will be employed to deliver suitable education and outreach in their communities. And we're targeting 10 divisions across New South Wales and Victoria that have historically experienced lower formality than other divisions for that process. We continue to adapt to meet changing community and stakeholder needs and to ensure our engagement programs are expansive and diverse. In addition to increased complexity surrounding election delivery, Australia is subject to the same global trends relating to cyber and physical security, misinformation, disinformation and electoral integrity that complicate elections in other democracies. In this context, our education and engagement activities are more critical than ever. Of course, election management bodies can't do it alone, and isolated electoral campaigns no longer suffice. The AEC sees value in a whole-of-government approach to improving digital media literacy, to improve the public's ability to identify disinformation and to reduce its spread. Research conducted by many, including Harvard University's with misinformation experts, conclude that digital literacy, above debunking and pre-bunking, was the most effective intervention against misinformation when widely adopted. Investment in a national digital literacy campaign is possibly the most significant thing we can do to combat mis- and disinformation. We continue to strive to be world leaders in education and engagement activities to uphold public trust in democracy and our electoral processes. We acknowledge the importance of this committee and we welcome the discussions, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr Rogers. Louise Miller-Frost, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in. I'm absolutely fascinated by the video game. I won't preempt the Chair, but I'd love to see it. But can you talk me through, like, I have to say the electoral process doesn't seem to lend itself to some of the general processes of gaming with the, you know, the rewards, etc. So can you talk me through kind of what actually you have got in the game in terms of what...
I might start by talking about why we're doing that. As I mentioned before, we're getting up to about 100,000 kids a year through our Electoral Education Centre here in Canberra, which is absolutely world leading, and it has been copied in a couple of other countries, and we're very happy with what we do. When you go to that centre, and we'd be happy to host a visit there, the kids do a whole range of things, from a video presentation on the history of Australia's electoral system, and then a highly immersive and digital experience where they actually do use, I don't know whether it's gamification, but certainly video games to engage them in a whole range of things, and they have questions that they answer. And then we take them in to run an election where they fulfil all sorts of different roles. They wear the vests, they vote for peaches and bananas, and I think peaches remain the #1 fruit for some reason, but they do all of that. But it's only for the 100,000 kids that come to Canberra that experience that. And we provide a whole range of other resources, but we've done a lot of research on what engages children at those age groups, and it is really highly interactive games that are based on, it's actually called Democracy, and they engage in that game. The trial has been very useful. We're tweaking it at the moment. I think our aim is to roll it out by term 1 in 2025, available to every school, and so we're hoping it has a big impact.
Thank you. So I'm from South Australia, so we don't have terribly many schools coming across compared to those who are more local. This sounds great, but in terms of what you're doing now to reach out to those more far-flung schools, what else do you provide in terms of education for them?
So I mentioned before, there's a whole range of programs. We do the Get Voting program, which we make available to every school, where we help schools actually conduct elections and teach them about preferential voting along the way, and we provide materials to those schools. As I've mentioned, earlier this year, I think in April, we wrote to the Department of Education, the Catholic Education Office, and every primary school in Australia, reminding them of those resources. We also provide teacher education, and I might... the Deputy might have more information about the detail of that, but we have an online teacher education session. We also have resources for teachers that we can provide as well. So we do already provide a big reach into those schools, but we're conscious that the centre in Canberra is mostly schools from New South Wales and Victoria, and oddly, not so many from the ACT for a whole range of reasons. But we would like to make that experience available everywhere. So the trial is in 4 states. There's a mix of urban and rural, including Indigenous and remote. So we're trialling a whole range of things to get that feedback, to roll that out urgently so it's available to every Australian school to be able to use that. So we're very proud of the initiative.
Thank you. I might leave it there for the moment. So.
Stanley? You mentioned that you're targeting 10 electoral districts because they're the ones with the highest informality. Which 10 are they?
We can provide you that list, Senator. I may not have that in front of me, but it's the seats that have traditionally have had the highest level of informality over the last few electoral events. Most of them are in Western Sydney, and a couple have bounced in now from Victoria, from memory as well. So we're trialling this program in those seats.
So is Werriwa one? And if so, how will we be involved as members of Parliament in that program for you?
Well, there's probably 2 answers to that. Carefully, because of the benefit of incumbency and making sure that this is a very neutral process that's being run by the AEC, the umpire, rather than an MP, because that carries other risks with it. But we will be employing, I think across the board, something, I might get this figure wrong, 80 is a number. Someone's going to correct me if I've got that wrong.
That's the Indigenous.
Oh, the Indigenous.
We've got 10 community, called community electoral participation officers. Do you want me to continue on
please.
with the divisions with the persistently challenging levels of formality are Blaxland, McMahon, Fowler, Werriwa, Watson, Parramatta and Sydney, and in Victoria, Nichols, Hawke and Corwell, where there's high degrees of literacy, language, multiculturalism, and they're the ones that will be focusing with the multicultural electoral participation officers. They're from a particular community, so therefore they speak language for the community. Not only will they be engaging, if I can, let's say, use Vietnamese as an example, not only will they be engaging with the Vietnamese community in the area that they live, but through their connections and networks and through assistance from us, engaging with the Vietnamese community broadly, obviously virtually, right across Sydney, Victoria and other parts of the country. So it's intended to be very much within your community where you are and also through your community networks more broadly in the language that they speak. And they'll be delivering education sessions that we have been pulling together with our expert educators to provide those levels of engagement, education and awareness to electors in the lead up to the next election.
Are you convinced that the level of informality has everything to do with English as a second language and not other reasons?
There are traditionally three factors that have contributed to high levels of informality. English as a second language is the number one. The number two is just a straight out number of candidates on the ballot paper. The higher the number of, the more candidates, the higher level of informality. And the third one traditionally has been when a federal event is held in proximity to a state electoral event where there's a different voting system and people get confused about those two things. They're the three big factors that traditional research has shown increase informality. But English as a second language is a big one.
We certainly want to trial this very focused in-language education in these areas and see whether that actually shifts the dial. And if it does, then we'll, after the election, consider what else we might be able to do.
Because you already, sorry to cut across you, you already provide significant resources in the top languages, certainly in my electorate, but that doesn't seem to have...
We translate all of our material into around about 35 languages. We have flip books in each of the polling places in languages. We also employ a lot of temporary election workers who talk multiple languages. I think out Parramatta Way we had one polling place at Auburn. We had 16 languages spoken in that polling place. So we do everything we possibly can. I think part of the challenge here might be actually just giving people the confidence to go to the polling place in the first instance, armed with the education.
In that polling place in Auburn where you had 16 members of your staff who could speak language, have you got any idea about how many of the community actually engaged with them?
In language in the polling place?
Yeah. Look, so, I mean, it's great that you provide that service. I'm just wondering how how confident communities feel to actually ask the question when they get there.
Yeah. It's a good question. We do, when we work out what languages people speak, when they actually turn up to work at the we do put a list of each of those languages. But before the event, we do a number of community sessions as well. I'm just thinking back to the referendum. I think around Australia we ran close to, well, nudging up towards 400 community education sessions, Indigenous, called all over Australia. And it's those, I think they're really useful sessions. As you know, Ms Stanley, we also do a huge amount of advertising in language as well to try and encourage people to go in. So it is a sticky metric. You know, this is why we're trying something different. That sort of generally 5% informality has been a sticky metric in those areas, and we, as you say, we've got a huge language
I'd like
reach.
5%, but okay.
Yeah.
Try 14, but
yeah.
Anyway.
And so that's why we're really trialling something different again to see what we can do. But I also acknowledge there's more than one lever involved in this process. There are many, many levers.
If I understood your description, you're employing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders for outreach coming up to the next federal election, and specific called workers to do that outreach as well. Going forward, after the next federal election, do you think there would be a case to have these employees all the time. So not just...
In those communities?
Yes. So it's not... Like, I mean, a 3-year cycle, to be fair, is not long. And so you're employing them, you're training them, you're making sure that they have the trust, both in Indigenous communities and called communities. Would it not be better... Or do you already... Like, did I misunderstand what you said? Or are these ramping up because we're having a federal election? Like, I'd just like to understand how you decide to employ these people.
So there's it's a great question. There's a range of different measures that we use here. You used the word trust before, and maybe that's the critical thing with some of the communities, is actually about building that trust. And the research has shown that many of the communities prefer to receive information from other trusted members of that community rather than somebody coming in from outside, which is why we are working with this community electoral participation officer program. We've trialled various things in the past as well. We've had similar, not quite the same as this, and for some of them we've had people for a longer period of time, for some a shorter period of time. Yep. I might get the Deputy to talk about this program and the practicality of dealing with some of the long-term nature of some of those relationships.
And certainly the research does indicate that they're more willing to walk inside a polling place, and this is particularly so in the Indigenous context, more willing to walk inside a polling place when they can see an Indigenous temporary election worker behind the table there, and they're more confident in terms of approaching them to be asking questions, particularly if they're being a bit vulnerable in terms of I don't understand what this means, or I can't follow the instructions. So the Community Electoral Participation Officer model, we used it in the 2022 election. We used it at the referendum, even more so in a remote sense, and it's highly successful for us. That's why we're now expanding it into the multicultural space, into these 10 target divisions for a trial. We'll see what the trial does. The data will be very instructive with respect to whether we can move the dial on the formality in those 10 divisions, which we'd dearly love to do. In terms of trying to keep them engaged across the 3 years, there's potentially some argument for that. I mean, we don't have fixed date elections, so elections can occur potentially at any time. I actually think the real value there, and I don't know how we would do this in our wonderful federation, but the real value would also be whether they can help pick up education on state and territory and local government elections in that intervening period, because that is the biggest bit of feedback that we get from electors, is understanding the 3 tiers of government. Not too many actually do, and the difference between them, understanding the different voting systems in Australia, not many do. So there is a big uplift to be done right across the country, and not just in schools, but with people that are already voting in some parts of the country.
In part, it is part of the intent of our partnership program to have a more permanent presence in those communities. I think we hit the peak of the partnership model around about the 2022 election. It's probably about 100 community organisations around Australia that we were partnered with, who had a more or less permanent presence in their communities that we were able to provide support to. Now, we had to wind that back for the referendum because some of those became involved in the politics of the referendum, and of course we can't partner with those organisations. We've got an aim, we're rebuilding by the next event, hopefully we'll have about 90 of those partnerships reactivated again. So that is kind of part of an answer to what you've said. And then secondly, I think at the referendum we employed more Indigenous staff than we've ever employed in any electoral event previously, and we'd hope to keep those levels very high because for the reasons that Mr Pope said, it does encourage people to participate in the process.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we'll just go to Ms Cheney.
Thank you very much for your evidence. So we've talked a bit about targeting supporting cohorts of Australians that are experiencing barriers to participation. I'm really interested in your understanding of the cohort of Australians for whom turnout is falling. And I believe that younger voters in inner city electorates might be showing that trend. So I'm interested in whether you track groups where participation is falling, and you know what you do about those groups and those trends, rather than the ones that are at an absolute low level, which I completely recognise is a priority.
We analyse turnout at every event, and we do tailor our messages to the extent that we can. There's a really interesting thing here, though, about the level of enrolment and the impact on high levels of enrolment on turnout. If I might spend a second on that. Just statistically, the higher the level of enrolment, there'll be a negative impact on turnout. So we are at the highest level of enrolment that we've ever been at as a nation since Federation, not only with just the general enrolment level, but also levels of Indigenous enrolment and levels of youth enrolment. And that's been a deliberate strategy of ours back since 2013, and I don't have the latest figures in front of me, but I want to say it's close to 98% enrolment. So the more people you put on the roll, you are putting some people on the roll who will not vote. So that depresses the level of turnout, but overall more people are voting than ever before. So first of all, we're proud of the fact that we've got the best enrolment that we've ever had since Federation, the best youth enrolment, etc. So we do target strategies towards those various categories. Globally, youth remain a challenge, and that's something we're working on. We've got a youth strategy. We reach out in various ways. In part, our social media strategy is aimed at youth to try and engage them in the electoral process. And I use the word engagement deliberately because it's not just about enrolment. It's not just good enough to get people on the roll. You actually have to engage them so that they're on the roll, they turn out to vote, and then they vote formally as part of the process. So we do target our messaging. We have a deliberate messaging for youth, deliberate messaging for called audiences, the disability community as well. Mr Pope chairs the Disability Advisory Group, for example, and they meet, I think, 3 times a year. We listen to those. We try and target our messages deliberately. So we do that. And I think this year of elections globally has also seen a global decrease in turnout across the board. We have actually been remarkably successful in maintaining pretty much the same level. I'm speaking generally, by the way, just not the detailed statistics, but the turnout level has remained remarkably consistent over many, many years. So that's kind of my answer. We look at it, we're doing our very best to engage with those groups, and it seems to be working to the extent that we can track.
So then does your analysis show that, and there's an assumption built into here that younger voters' turnout is declining. I guess, firstly, is that the case? And then secondly, is that entirely attributable to enrolments going up? And are there other cohorts where you're seeing, it's specific cohorts where you're seeing turnout decline? Or is it pretty steady?
Look, I think I'd like to take that one on notice without extending myself here in a way that when I look at my own stats, I'm going to correct myself. But I'm telling you that from what I'm seeing, enrolment is really high. It is intrinsically linked with turnout. More Australians are voting than ever before as a result of the high turnout. I think globally, our high enrolment, I think globally our levels of turnout would be seen to be amongst the best in the world. Now, a lot of that's because we have compulsory voting. I don't have any anecdotal evidence that there's been a plummet in youth turnout. I mean, if we were going back a couple of years, I remember talking to this committee after the same-sex marriage plebiscite. There were some assumptions that the youth component of the turnout for that event went up because it was a single issue that they were motivated by. And I know also afterwards that some people that enrolled deliberately for that event, some young people were then very surprised that they had to vote in other events afterwards and were somewhat disappointed in that. But I think we're doing okay. I'm kind of looking over my shoulder. People are nodding, so I might take it on notice and give a bit more thought to it rather than giving you any more off the cuff?
That would be great. I think given the perception that there is increasing disengagement amongst younger people, any data that you have that shows whether or not there is declining turnout from young people or other specific cohorts, and the extent to which that is caused by an increase in enrolments would be really interesting. I think just to show us, where are the emerging issues in terms of trust in our democracy from different cohort groups. Yeah, thank you.
Well, only because you've just opened the door on that for a moment, if I might. All of this leads together to the broad issue of trust, which is something we've been focused on for a number of years. We're very, very conscious that trust in electoral outcomes is the building blocks on which the legitimacy of Parliament actually is constructed. And we've really worked on that and that whole concept of trust in electoral outcomes. And as I think we've said to this committee before, all the research shows that broadly Australians trust the electoral process and trust the AEC to count people's votes the way that they're cast. And that number is around the 8 or 9 out of 10 level, which we think is so important for democratic legitimacy, and we really work on that and have been very successful at doing so.
Can I just a slightly tangential issue on that, because I've heard that 8 or 9 out of 10, which I think is a fantastic thing that we need to hold on to. I'm very interested in a state-by-state breakdown of that. For example, whether South Australia's truth and political advertising laws have degraded that trust in any way, or if trust in South Australia, is at a similar level to others, because in order to protect that reputation. Do you know? I suppose you've got that data off the top of your head.
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to think about it. But I saw some interesting research yesterday, which I'm not at liberty to release because it's embargoed until October. It's not by us. The Susan McKinnon Foundation has done some work on polarisation in Australia, and they've got a survey, and kind of related. They did a bit on institutes that are trusted, and electoral management bodies are still amongst the most trusted. But they also did a thing about which state trusts local government the most, and I won't spoil their thunder here, but it was just fascinating, and maybe it's tied in with that as well. So yeah.
Thank you. I think I might have had one more, but I was interested. You've done some great, innovative programs, and I was really interested in what other institutions can learn about what approaches or capabilities you apply. For example, are you using a human-centred design approach, looking to best practice sharing with other jurisdictions? How do you actually ensure that you're at the cutting edge of program design and regulation?
That is a really interesting area of what we do with that, achieving that trust outcome. It's something we've really focused on. I think I've briefed this committee previously that we run a reputation management system internally to try and manage our reputation, which has been very successful. But we look globally at what others are doing. We've recently hosted here in Canberra the Canberra series on electoral integrity with the involvement of electoral commissions from around the world, looking at what they do to try and make sure that the programs are actually hitting the way that they're supposed to hit, particularly in this broad area of communication, mis and disinformation. And again, I think what we're doing with our reputation management system, with our Stop and Consider campaign, is still seen as world leading. We take extra care on that. I can tell you that unless something goes wrong, we're hosting the head of the UK Electoral Commission here in Australia on the 14th of October, where we're sharing information again on what we're doing with some of those issues to make sure that what we're doing is at the very cutting edge of what's occurring globally. And I'd also just put in there that we've got a value system within the AEC, and one of those values is agility. And you asked about human-centred design before. Part of our success has been to really move quickly to adapt what we're doing to meet the needs of the community. So that's been very successful for us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon. Yes, it is. Good afternoon, Mr Rogers. Lovely to see you and your team again. I'd like to pick up the theme that you were just talking about with Ms Cheney about democratic legitimacy. and some of the implications of the trends that we're seeing. I know that you do a lot of work in this, and you've got, what is it, I think in your report you call it the DDU?
Yep.
And about the legitimacy of electoral information. So in relation to this, one of the things we've had a lot of evidence on in this inquiry is the lack of civics knowledge. None of this you deal with this, but sort of the combination of disengagement, lack of trust, lack of understanding of our democratic systems, and increasingly now misinformation on social media. So in relation to the next election, so when you've got not just younger voters who are quite in that frame of mind and who are also quite vulnerable to misinformation, particularly now we're seeing from foreign actors, and we've seen that in the very quick radicalisation of younger Australians, who'd never heard of Hamas or Palestine, or still don't know what river and sea they're chanting. But that's happened very, very quickly and very deliberately, as we know, by foreign actors. So, who are also well reported now trying to misinformation and impacting on political parties themselves and the legitimacy or issues with political parties, but as you were just referring to, is actually seeking to undermine electors' confidence in democracy itself as a way of foreign interference. So in light of that, one, do you agree with my general characterisation? And two, how do you see the threats, but also what you're doing and what you see others need to do to make sure that, obviously reducing foreign interference is not your particular role, but the implications of it are things that you deal with. So can you just unpack how you're seeing that and what you're doing to counter it as the AEC and then possibly in conjunction with other agencies? A long question, but
perhaps, Senator, I might try and sort of cover the field with a few different things because it's such an important area, and tell you what our view is. I don't want to refer to a specific country, just to be very, very clear here. So I'm just talking generically, but we have seen what has occurred in a few overseas countries with their elections,
yes,
and the lack of trust in the outcome of those elections. And a couple of those very big elections over the last few years led us to develop our own reputation management strategy, because for some of those elections it was not a failure of administration, it was a failure of reputation, where people had deliberately undercut the election management bodies, and they delivered an okay election, but the online chatter with conspiracy theories and a whole range of things really impacted on the election. And we're not immune to that here. We've got the same sorts of issues. I continue to receive some really quirky correspondence from people who believe a whole range of things, and
you're not in your lonesome in that. I think we could all say
we're all getting the same stuff. I got one of my faves this week. Someone demanding that I tell them about the involvement of extraterrestrials in Australia's electoral system, and so there's a lot of stuff out there, and that can really impact on what citizens think about the electoral process. So that's when we set up our reputation management system. We've established the Defending Democracy Unit, which you referred to before. We've got one of the most active social media presences in the Commonwealth, and that's deliberate. And it's not just about having an active social media presence, but it's targeted. At the referendum, for example, the combination of all of the things that we do, our overall campaign that we ran at the referendum, we got something like 1 million impressions on social media. It's one of the biggest reaches of any government campaign ever. We run our Stop and Consider campaign, which I just want to use as a highlight in a moment to talk about what I think we should do. We're getting about 20% recognition of that campaign in the community. And it's cheap as chips, Senator. And of the 20% who tell us that they see that campaign, it's about stop and consider where the information's coming from, stop and consider the source of that information. Large numbers of people tell us it does change how they consume information. We also established a thing called AEC TV, which sounds very grand, but it's a cupboard where we fill YouTube videos effectively with a backdrop. And where we see a piece of misinformation online or disinformation, we immediately cut normally a less than 2-minute video, put that on AEC TV and use our social media to point to it. And if I've got the stats wrong, I think we've had something like 1 million views of those videos, something like that. It's been hugely successful for us in dealing with some of those issues. We're one of the first Commonwealth agencies and first election management bodies to put online a disinformation register, where we specifically called out pieces of disinformation about the electoral process and put examples up there and told people what we're doing. So we couldn't have been more active in that space. Yeah. At the same time, starting in 2019, we've been supported by a large group of other Commonwealth agencies through the Electoral Integrity Assurance Task Force, and they're a collection of security agencies, Senator, who assist us at election time, and not just us, by the way. The Commonwealth has provided that resource to the state election management bodies as well. They stand up for full state elections. And they assist us particularly in looking at the other issue that you raised with the overseas interference. One of the tasks of the EIAT, and Mr Pope is the chair of the board of the EIAT, is to provide me with advice as Commissioner about whether they saw anything that would be of significant concern during the election. All of that, I think, is really useful, and again, is absolutely at the cutting edge of what's occurring globally, and I think has helped us maintain this 9 out of 8 or 9 out of 10 trust rating. But the research seems to show that debunking is necessary but doesn't work to change people's views. Just because someone says something online, when we jump online and say it's wrong, if I can use an example, Senator, the last couple of electoral events, there's been this conspiracy about the fact that we're using Dominion voting machines in Australia. And so it's nutty, right? Anyone that's been into a polling place in Australia knows we don't use voting machines, but when we say it's nutty and we don't use them, the response is kind of, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Because people who are down that rabbit hole, you can't pull them out. Pre-bunking works a heck of a lot better. But what really works, and this is research not just from us, from Harvard, shows that we really need to raise the level of digital literacy of our citizens is the number one thing that will help them navigate some of these difficult waters. And part of that is like our Stop and Consider campaign, but the research shows citizens say, oh, we understand why you do that campaign as the AEC, but why aren't we doing something like that all the time to really boost the level of digital literacy of our citizens? That's the number one thing that I think we should be doing to assist with that. We're very grateful for the support we're receiving from other agencies across the board, those security agencies and other policy agencies that help us through the task force. We're grateful for opportunities like this to talk about it. In addition, the other thing I should have said, we've deliberately raised the profile of the AEC at every electoral event. Now, the number of media interviews we do is phenomenal. It's a deliberate decision to counter the mis and disinformation. If I can use a very bad quote in reverse, it's to flood the zone with positive information about elections itself. Now, just if I finish off, our remit, though, is to talk about the electoral process. There is mis and disinformation about candidates and about what they're doing, and that's a slightly different issue, and we've seen examples of that globally over the last couple of years. But again, I think the digital literacy campaign will help citizens with that as well. And if we were looking as a nation at the number one thing we should do, it's that, and we should do it quickly.
So the digital, thank you, that was very, very helpful. So with the digital literacy, is that really, in some ways, it's actually, is it teaching people how to critically think in the age of in the digital age? Is that sort of at the heart of it? It's
absolutely part of it. It's even being able to arm them with whatever we can arm them with to identify what's real and what's not real online, particularly as we lurch into the sort of AI era, and to give them better skills to understand how information is generated online and the kind of framework within which it's generated. I think that will really assist. It's a poor analogy, Senator, but at the moment what we're doing is we're sort of acid rains occurring outside, and we're trying to give citizens raincoats as they walk out the door, and they're not great raincoats and people forget to wear them, and we should be stopping the rain. Yes. And I think that's about actually giving people the skills they need to navigate this.
I hadn't heard the term, I don't know if colleagues have, but pre-bunking. That's actually what I haven't heard, but I think that actually is quite a powerful concept. In terms of all of the things that you're doing and things like, I hadn't actually heard of the AEC TV, for example. Is there ways that we could, as in parliamentarians, and maybe one of the things in this report is actually what more can we do to, one, be aware of and up to date with what you're doing, because these statistics are fantastic, and what you've said makes that whole package of things make a lot of sense, but it shouldn't just be up to the AEC. I mean, you're doing a great job in all of these areas, but this is not just your sole responsibility. So are there ways, and perhaps on notice, that you could suggest how we could actually, as parliamentarians, I think there'd be few, if any, members or senators who wouldn't like to engage in their own communities in terms of literacy about the process and the integrity of the process, particularly possibly sort of in that civic space, and with that younger cohort who are particularly cynical and disengaged and prone to social media bots and misinformation.
Let me dwell on that, Senator. I think any time we can amplify the message, it's useful. And maybe a practical thing right now, just as an example, our Stop and Consider campaign, which I've said previously, there's no surprise of it. We shamelessly copied it from the Swedes. They had a slightly different message. I think it was, their Swedish message was, if it makes you angry, it's probably fake, which apparently sounds great in Swedish. I actually thought that was pretty good. We adapted that over here to Stop and Consider, but now it's being amplified because right now with the Queensland election that's occurring, they're using the same message, Stop and Consider, deliberately, so it further amplifies that. New South Wales local government election also using Stop and Consider. We could take on notice how we could maybe provide senators and MPs with some extra information about what we're currently doing and how they might be able to further push that out. We are getting really good click-throughs to the material on our website from our ad campaign. It's really been hugely successful, so I'm happy to provide that for you in ways that might further assist.
Because even programs with sort of senior high schools, you know, with particularly people will be coming out first-time voters, you know, we've all got, we can sort of boost our social media into particular groups and whatever. So anyway, I hope that's okay, Chair, but I think that would actually be very helpful.
Work, the better.
We also did a couple of other things. Like I know it sounds like we're throwing a handful of rice at the side of the barn to see what hits, but because
you've got to do it.
You've got to do it. We even did, and I really understand the platform, but the deputy and I think National Election Management did an Ask Me Anything session on Reddit. Last election and at the referendum, and we got some good buy-in for that. A couple of 100,000 people, and they did ask anything. Let me tell you. But that's an important way of us being able to get out there and demonstrate. Again, flooding the zone with positive information, which we'll continue to do. So.
Thank you. Great news. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just quickly, and you can take this on notice. I just wonder whether you could provide the information about informal voting by voting type, and also whether you keep informal voting information by polling booth or electorate, or what? How do you keep it?
We do have the informal vote by electorate. We can provide that.
If you could provide that on notice, that'd be great. Okay. So thank you for coming along today and providing information to the committee, and the additional information that you've been asked to provide. Could you please forward that to the Secretariat by Friday the 27th of September? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members.
So thank you, committee members. Thank you, Secretariat, and thank you, Hansard. I now declare this meeting closed.
Thank you.